Добрый день. Добрый день. Hello. Мы подождем еще несколько минут и потом начнем.
We'll wait for a couple of more minutes and then we'll start.
Hello, Mergul. Werner speaking from Hamburg.
Yes. Hello.
Good to see you.
Yes. Unfortunately, I cannot see you.
I have on my screen the overall screen, but I think it looks as if everything is working well. I can see you with the appropriate background. I am sure that others are there. We have 37 participants. I just wanted to clarify that for the PowerPoint, I suppose I will share my screen then, right?
Yes.
Okay.
We'll
Let's hope for the best.
Miguel, this is Angela. How are you?
Hi, Angela. Nice to see you.
Good. Do we have a confirmation that all the countries are available, or did it work out in the end? Perfect.
Yes, except Iran.
Iran.
We won't
Okay.
have Iran, unfortunately, yes.
Except Iran. All right.
Hello, Ichiro. I see Ichiro is connected as well.
Thank you so much. Yes, hello. Yes, good to see you all.
Yes.
Hi, Chiro.
Hi, Waina.
Hello,
Are you okay, Waina?
Huh? Excuse me?
You sound so tired, Waina.
No,
Are you okay?
That's perhaps a problem with the throat, but otherwise I think I'm fine. No, thank you.
Good.
You.
Hi, Tekla. See Tekla.
Hi, Virgo colleagues. Nice to see you.
Hi, Tekla.
Hello, colleagues.
Hi.
Virgo, do you hear me?
Hello,
And
Tekla.
Krista is connected as well. Hi, Krista.
Hi, do you hear me well?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Good afternoon and good morning, colleagues.
Hi.
Good afternoon.
Добрый день. Доброе утро кому-то.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, good day to some of you.
Я думаю, что мы можем начать.
I think we'll probably be getting started.
Перевод всё.
Probably the translation is going on. Should be going on at least. Hello again, good afternoon, good day, assalamu alaikum, distinguished colleagues, partners, and also all of our distinguished participants. Welcome to this sub-regional consultation meeting for the countries of Central Asia and for the preparation for the International Adult Education Conference, CONFINTEA VII. My name is Mirgula Spaiva. I'm a National Professional Officer on the educational issue in the Cluster Bureau of UNESCO in Almaty. So today I'm going to be moderating the first part of this meeting. And before we actually get down to the welcoming remarks and so on, I just would like to go through several logistical issues, several rules on how to use this Zoom software. If you would like to show you some slides. So today we're meeting online. Everyone is able, or at least should be able to get their cameras and sound on. But your best advice to keep your microphone off or mute just to avoid any unwanted interference. And you can also rename your name just to enable others to better see who you are, who you represent, from what country you are from. Also today we're having the simultaneous interpretation. It's Russian to English and English to Russian. In order to be able to use translation, you need to click on the globe sign at your bottom panel, interpretation, the globe sign, and you can choose one of those languages available for the interpretation, depending on what their preferences, language preferences, of course, English or Russian. Also would like to warn you that today at this meeting, we will basically recording this session and taking pictures. So I would like to ask you to use the chat box facility. If you have any questions or comments, as we move on, we'll try to accommodate everyone. And upon completion of this meeting, you will also have a link using which, well, you can send us some of your feedback. Hopefully, you will be able to fill out our questionnaires or feedback forms. So now let us actually get down to the welcoming remarks. Let me now give the floor for the welcoming remark.
Бюро по Казахстану, Кыргызстану, Таджикистану и Узбекистану госпоже Кристи Пикат.
Mr. Krista Pickett, the Director of Class.
Спасибо большое, Миргул. Уважаемые участники, партнеры.
Distinguished participants, partners, colleagues. Well, I'm very pleased to welcome you on behalf of the UNESCO Cluster Bureau in Almaty at today's sub-regional consultation session with the countries of Central Asia for the sake of preparation for the International Conference for Education of Adults, CONFINTEA VII, that is going to be organized by the UNESCO Institute Education, Lifelong Education in 2022. UNESCO, in cooperation with TVV International, is organizing this sub-regional consultation for the countries of Central Asia for the sake of sharing experience and highlighting some of the key issues, innovations, and prospective strategies for updating these regions' countries' policies in the area of education and learning of adults. Education and learning of adults is basically one of the more important areas to achieve sustainable development goals, specifically number 4. And the central component of lifelong education, well, basically it includes all forms of education, learning and training designed to ensure participation of all adults in the life of their communities, societies, and labor. Basically, it covers formal, informal education, and formal education. The purposes of delivering recommendations to achieve Sustainable Development Goals, SDG 4. Last year, we published our sub-regional report named Ensuring the Lifelong Learning Capacities for Everyone in Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, the experience of individual countries, and recommendations on the policy development issues. So this report, the countries of Central Asia, basically there is no common policy and adult education or lifelong education in Central Asia. There is no single policy. Well, basically by education for adults, the countries of Central Asia mostly understand vocational or continuous education, vocational training and continuous education, on-job training, such as improving qualification, upgrading someone's skills, both within the formal systems and educational institutions with informal curriculum. In practice, there are only limited capacities to get education for adults financed by the state in the form of continuous education or
квалификаций и переподготовки кадров. Однако последние десятилетия формальному и неформальному обучению и ООЭ уделяется большое внимание, и как следствие выросли возможности его получения. Кроме того, выросла популярность и востребованность специальных тренингов.
So demand for specialized training related to various sectors of the labor market. The range of educational institutions in the countries of Central Asia is quite extensive. And in many instances, this is to the large extent some Soviet legacy. The report highlights some of the issues that the countries of Central Asia encounter related to the education of adults, including the lack of legislative and other frameworks for training, teaching, teachers or professors for adult education and organizing some other issues related to the organization of the process. The report also specifies the urgent need for the interagency and regional cooperation in this specific area, and also the recommendations to strengthen national qualification frameworks in order to acknowledge qualifications and training outcomes of the adults. Hopefully, today's meeting will become one of the platforms for the substantial discussion of these issues and priorities in the learning and education of adults in Central Asia, and will improve the role of lifelong education, the educational policies of this country. Based on the results of this meeting, together with a group of experts, we're planning to prepare a report on some of the key objectives, key possibilities, and recommendations to update the policies and activities in the area of education and learning of adults in the region, which will serve as a foundation for the development of recommendations for the regional final documents as the information basis for CONFINTEA VII. Having this possibility, let me thank our partners, our colleagues from the UNESCO International Institute Lifelong Education, UNESCO offices in the cities of Bangkok and Tashkent, and also my own team, UNESCO Cluster Bureau in Almaty, for the joint organization of this sub-regional consultation. We appreciate your support and regular cooperation. I kind of hope that this meeting will be relevant and productive for all of the participants. I'd like to wish you very productive work, active contributions, and thank you for your attention. Thank you, Krista. Krista, thank you very much. We are moving to the next welcoming remark. Let me give the floor to Mr. Amir Piric, the coordinator of the UNESCO Institute for the Lifelong Learning. Mr. Amir Piric, the floor is yours.
Well, спасибо большое. First of all, I would like to use this opportunity to welcome the government representatives from Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan, as well as the CSO representation, DVV International, and the Asian South Pacific Association for Basic and Adult Education. For your information, this is now the second sub-regional preparatory consultation for CONFINTEA VII. And after the first was held earlier this year in January with the representatives from the East Asia sub-regions, and it was organized by our Beijing cluster office and UNESCO Bangkok. We would also like to express our gratitude and thanks to our office in Almaty and to the director, to Krista, for efficiently liaison with the regional offices in Bangkok for organization of this consultation process in spite of all COVID-19 restrictions. I would also like to note with appreciation the fact that the countries who are involved, which are active in AIL and lifelong learning things, have contributed their national reports to GRAIL 5 survey last year in preparation of the 5th global report on adult learning and education to be launched at CONFINTEA VII. And finally, I would like to express my appreciation for the debate and expected outcomes on different matters to be discussed with the view of having a successful conference in Morocco in 22. And I would like also to use this opportunity to see as many participants at this event as possible, but we will see how the things are going to develop. We are not sure yet whether this event in Morocco is going to be online or a hybrid model or in presence, but let's hope for the best. So I'll stop at this stage, and once again, thank to everybody.
Thank you. Спасибо большое, господин
Thank you very much, Mr. Amir Piric. Now I would like to give the floor to Ms. Tekri Kalbert, the Regional Director for Central Asia, DVV International, for her welcoming remark. Ms. Kalbert, the floor is yours. Mirgul, thank you very much, colleagues.
First of all, to the co-organizers, the colleagues in the UNESCO Almaty Cluster Office, we we as DVV International are very glad to be part of this joint endeavor as co-organizers of today's meeting, and that you approached us again on this very recently. It's just one step in a long row of events that we have joined in, and it's of course a very important step in the process towards the CONFINTEA. I'm also particularly glad to see that we will have a very wide spectrum, I guess, of participants today in the room of stakeholders present with us already. It's over 80 people I can see, and it will be representatives from the governments, from the state side in the Central Asian countries, and also including a lot of colleagues from the CSOs in the region. I'm very glad to be aware of the active participation that will take place from the side of ASPE, which was already mentioned, and to also see colleagues from IKE in the room with us already, from the International Council for Adult Education. So I think this is a very good basis for the important exchange and debates and presentations that we will share today. And yeah, I wish everyone a very fruitful meeting, which forms a stepping stone towards the regional conference then, which will continue the debates, and then of course eventually the CONFINTEA, in whichever form it will take place. I'm very glad that we already see a very large buy-in into this process from our region here in Central Asia. So thank you very much again for for having us actively participate.
Thank you, Tekla. Спасибо большое, Tekla.
Tekla, thank you very much. Right now, before we actually move on to the welcoming presentations from our colleagues from UAL, we would like to ask you to take a group picture of all of the participants. So please turn on your cameras right now. If you want to be in the picture, well, we would like to take a screenshot. Let me say it, 1, 2, 3. Here we are. Hopefully the colleagues have been able to get themselves visible. So now let us move to the actual consultation, the first presentation. And for the welcoming part for the presentation, I'd like to pass the floor to our distinguished colleagues, Mr. Werner Mauch, the head of education for adults from the UNESCO Institute, Lifelong Learning. Werner, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mirgul, and hello to everybody. My pleasure to be here this afternoon or morning in other parts of the world. Thanks for joining us. And thanks especially to the colleagues from the Almaty office, but also from DVV International for enabling, for helping us to have this opportunity. I would now like to try out with my technical skills to share my presentation, and I hope it is here and the presentation is there. Share. Is it visible?
Yes, we can see it.
And I can also move. Okay, so I would like to give an overview on the CONFINTEA process as it looks at the moment, and as we know it as a kind of routine, but also is fresh for the newcomers. It takes place every 12 years, the International Conference on Adult Education, CONFINTEA, which is an international platform on youth and adult learning. It is meanwhile the standard that we're talking about youth and adult education, following a tendency, especially from the Latin American region, but also it has become a worldwide concern that adult education takes place with those who take part in it. And so youth is also a large group that is part and is targeted by adult education. Since 1949, we have had 6 CONFINTEA conferences, and they take place around every 12, 13, 11 years. The last one has taken place in Belém in 2009 in Brazil. The key participants are the ministers responsible for ALE from UNESCO member states. They are invited by the Director General. They are asked to form delegations that mirror the variety of adult education practice in the countries. UN and international organizations will also send observers, and we will have civil society representatives, especially to mirror the practice side of adult education. And we are also looking into looking forward to the participation of the private sector, because private sector has become a major player in adult education all over the world in so many countries. And we also hope that media coverage will be good and that there will be an international interest in it. And so the media will also be part of the game. And for this joining of the international adult learning and education community. The overview looks as such. We have a timeline from 2009 to 2022 here. I just recapitulate briefly. So CONFINTEA VI, we have this orange arrow from 2009 to 2022. The milestone of CONFINTEA VI was the adoption of the Belém framework for action, which has become the blueprint for adult education policy and practice in UNESCO member states, with its 5 areas of action: policy, governance, financing, participation, and quality. In Belém, member states adopted this framework, and meanwhile they are implementing it. And the UNESCO Institute for Lifelong Learning, UIL, is asking member states every 3 years to give an account in how far they have fulfilled their commitments. And we do that through GRAIL, the Global Report on Adult Learning and Education. You see at the bottom line that we are now approaching to the 5th issue in 2022. So the next edition of GRAIL will be published on the occasion of CONFINTEA VII in Morocco. In 2015, there was another element, a new element into this overall construct with the UNESCO recommendation on adult learning and education, RAIL. It has been adopted by all UNESCO member states and has become a similar element like the Belém framework for action. And member states are supposed to follow the recommendation on ALE, and in this way reorganizing and reforming, revitalizing their offers and their existing practice of adult learning and education in the countries. In 2018, we had a midterm review. In 2017, we had a midterm review in in Suwon and Osan in Korea, where we took stock of the developments of adult learning and education in between 2 CONFINTEA. So this is also a regular element of organizing the international ALE community. The key actors in the CONFINTEA process are the national UNESCO commissions and the permanent delegations. These are the ambassadors and the meeting points in countries for concerns of CONFINTEA and UNESCO. We also work together with UNESCO regional cluster and field offices as it is visible now. The whole preparatory process is characterized by a close coordination within the UNESCO network. We will create an advisory group consisting of representatives from member states, from UN agencies, from international organizations, from academia, and from partners like ICAI and DVV International. This advisory group, called Consultative Committee, officially is now being created and will be, the first meeting will probably take place within the next few weeks. So in 2021, looking at the timeline, we will have this series of sub-regional consultations. Asia is here the leading region, where we already have 2 sub-regional consultations, with the second today, and the next one on 30th of March already for South Asia. And these sub-regional consultations will culminate in regional conferences in all regions. These regional conferences will bring together the regional focuses, the regional concerns, the regional views, and bring them into the international conference. We will also have several meetings of the advisory committee, the consultative group. And we are in the process of preparing the 5th edition of GRAIL, which will have a thematic focus on citizenship education. Citizenship education will also be one of the key themes at CONFINTEA VI, we are convinced of. In 2021, we will have the international conference together with the launch of GRAIL 5. And in 2022, then we will adopt, or member states will adopt, the new framework for action that will structure further activities on the country level in adult learning and education. We will, the key themes we will cover, or we will address at CONFINTEA. It also already crystallizes what these themes will be, and the regional and sub-regional consultations will help us to get a closer look and to be better aware what are the concerns of member states. But we are sure that adult learning and education in the framework of lifelong learning as a central component will play a key role. We will look at the role of adult learning and education for sustainable development and the education to 2030 framework at the sustainable development goals. We will have a look at how ALE can respond, or did respond, to the COVID-19 crisis. We will see in how far ICTs will influence further practice, also policy and also research of ALE, with potentials and risks, but also looking into the potentials of social media and artificial intelligence. We will look at ALE as a driver of social coherence, and especially a special concern will be in the possibility of new partnerships within the adult learning and education community, including the private sector. So these will be the principal topics, but we are looking forward into closer looks from the regions and sub-regions. That's the overall purpose of the consultations we are engaging now. So that's the principal perspective of the whole process from my view. Thanks a lot. I'm looking forward to a vital debate and to the contributions of all. Thank you.
Thank you. Спасибо, Бернар, за такое.
Thank you very much, Bernard, for such a comprehensive and overwhelming presentation. And I believe that our today's participants believe that your presentation enabled our participants to get an understanding of what CONFINTEA and why we are conducting our today's meeting. I mean, those participants who have joined us for the first ever time. And for the next presentation, let me turn the floor to Mr. Ichira Miyazawa, who is a program specialist from UNESCO Bangkok office, who is going to tell us about the goals of the regional consultation for CONFINTEA VII in 2022. Thank you, Ichira. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm so happy to participate in this sub-regional consultation in Central Asia. My name is Ichiro from UNESCO Bangkok office. Since Werner, explained comprehensively about the process, let me not, repeat the same thing. There are 6 important points for today. Today we have 3.5 hours, very intensive, short time, but then let's make it productive. And then I want all of you to think about 6 important points in your mind all the time. Number 1, key issue and challenges we have been facing decades and decades in order to promote ALE. Number 2, let's look at the good cases or innovative cases, right, addressing those challenges issues. Number 3, let's look at the influence, negative influence or impact of COVID-19, and also some innovative new approaches in order to promote ALE. So that's the number 3 point. Number 4 point is then what do we do, like strategies? We look for example, right now 2021, and then we have to look for the strategy 2030, even 2040, looking at all changes, right? And then fortunately, lifelong learning or ALE is more important than before. And what kind of strategy we want to pose regionally, even internationally. And then let's look at the priority at the number 6 point, right? Because maybe we come up with a lot of strategies, but then we do have to put some priorities. So that's the key point I want you to just keep in your mind when we discuss all the issues. And I hope today, 3.5 hours is going to be very interesting and productive. And then this result is going to be brought to the regional conference, which Ivana mentioned. We are planning to do it on May or June, Asia Pacific Region Conference, which is covering almost 60 countries. Then next year for the Morocco. Thank you so much for your participation. That's all for me.
Thank you, Ichiro. Спасибо большое.
Thank you very much, Ichiro. And I believe that now we will have to get down to the main part about today's webinar. And this is session number 1, country presentations. And this particular session is aiming at the exchange of information on the current status, achievements, and the tasks in the area of ALE. On the country level, on the national level. Therefore, please ask your questions to the presenters in the chat box of Zoom. And after everybody will make their presentations, the country representatives will be able to answer your questions. And in the alphabetical order, we will make the presentations. This is the reason for which the floor is now turned to the representatives of Kazakhstan. On behalf of the Ministry of Education and Science of the Republic of Kazakhstan, the country presentation will be made by Ms. Miraim Danaeva, who is the Vice President of the Information and Analytical Center of the Ministry of Education and Science of the Republic of Kazakhstan. Miraim, please, the floor is yours. Good afternoon, distinguished colleagues. Thank you very much for this opportunity to talk to all of you. Unfortunately, I've got some problem with my cam because my video cam was broken. You will not be able to see me. However, nevertheless, I'm going to share my presentation with you. First and foremost, I would like to know the following issue. Of course, in Kazakhstan, there is ALE, but it is not formalized in the form of some normative acts or sub-laws. The ALE is not incorporated into the law on education of Kazakhstan. So it does exist as trainings, as the qualification improvement courses, etc., but it is not formalized. And we have already been raising this issue in different meetings in the Ministry of Education, and we understand that it is one of our losses, and we believe that we have to officially move along these lines. And this is the reason for which Kazakhstan, for the first ever time, participated in the research of the skills available among the adult population in Kazakhstan. And I would like to share the results of this study to you. And indeed, we are trying to find out all the pros and cons in the course of this study. And we are trying to pass some recommendations as to the directions along which we will have to progress. And this is the reason for which, since this study on adult population as it is was not available before, therefore we try to use some independent tools, and we started using PIAAC. And I would like to say a few words about it because it's an international research or study that is actually analyzing the educational market, the labor market in different economies all over the world. And the randomized selection is roughly about 4.5 thousand. And the maximum number was in 2013, 27.3 thousand people. And they usually are using various surveys to identify the skills, such basic schools, such as, for example, the reading. They are conducting certain tests, as well as they are evaluating various skills that are soft skills that are necessary for people to work with other people, with other organizations and companies. And there are various aspects that they were evaluating. This is the reading literacy, mathematical literacy, and high-tech tasks resolution. So if you don't know this PIAC instrument, I'm explaining its essence. So the reading literacy is the skill to understand, to evaluate, to work with written texts. For example, when a person buys a refrigerator, takes the operator manual, should understand what to do and how to get it connected to the mains and avoid any problems. Mathematical literacy is the capability to evaluate, to use, to interpret, and to transfer mathematical data. For example, when a person should be capable to read banking documents, bank statements, its capability to understand the content of mathematical texts. And finally, the skills of resolving various tasks in high-tech environment. This is the possibility to use various tools for collection and the evaluation of data. This is also ability to interact with people while resolving various tasks. And in addition, there are it's a kind of five-step system with the help of which we are describing various levels of skills. For example, the first level is very basic, and the most advanced is level number 4 and 5. And on this slide, you will see what the first level means. For example, the person having the first level of skills can understand very basic vocabulary, has a capability to read, but this reading literacy is not very high. However, on the second level of literacy, a person should be capable to integrate two or more fragments of the information based on certain criteria. People should also be capable to evaluate some parts of the text. But if you take level 3, for example, then the person will be able not only to understand the text, but also do the evaluation, analyze, deduct, synthesize the data. And if you take the most advanced level, level number 4 and 5, here you see the levels of reading literacy in various countries. As I said, that there are 39 member countries who are participating in this evaluation, and you see that the first level and lower is marked in yellow. The second level is represented in orange, and then the black one is number 3, and the green is number 4 and 5. So you see where Kazakhstan is. You see that Kazakhstan level is right here. We understand that at the very end of this list, there are such countries as Mexico, Peru, and Ecuador. And on the top of this list, you see Japan, Finland, Netherlands, Sweden, Australia, etc. So here is the picture of reading literacy. If we take mathematical literacy, the picture is more or less the same. We see almost the same countries on the same places. I'm sorry. Can you show it full screen, because it's really very small and it's hardly edible. Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, you know, I've done it the usual way, which is convenient for me. So if you take a look at all 39 countries, the average level of OECD countries, you see the level of mathematical literacy. Unfortunately, Kazakhstan is too far away from OECD countries level, but yet we are not at the bottom. Now, talking about the skills to resolve various high-tech tasks, the evaluation is a little bit different. The point is that there are some adults who simply do not know, and they don't know how to use PCs or other ICT devices. And since we were evaluating the people at the age between 16 to 65, then of course there are some layers of adult population who were never using PCs. Yes, they were having some very very limited experience of using the computer, but at the same time they were not processing our surveys in a soft version because they don't have skills for this. And this is the reason for which such a reply was pretty expected. And people were unwilling to show that they are not competent in this particular area. We understood it very well. This is the reason for which we provided some of our surveys, questionnaires on paper. And of course, the adults of level number 1, 2, and 3, you see the definitions of the level of skills that they should have. And if you take a look at the group which didn't want to participate in the questionnaire, we decided to also differentiate them among various countries. You see the OECD countries because this study was actually initiated by OECD, and we've been working jointly on the analysis and the interpretation of the obtained data. Kazakhstan, you see where it is located next to OECD. And in the green, you see the part of the population who does not know how to use computer at all. And you see how many people did not manage to pass even a basic ICT literacy test. For example, when they said, okay, let us make a try, but they did not manage to pass the test. And you see the lowest let's say, a level of people who did not manage to pass the basic test is New Zealand, Switzerland, and Sweden. And now if we analyze the labor market and the education.
Вы видите, что практически половина казахстанцев достигает 2-го уровня.
50% of the Kazakhstani population have some reading literacy and mathematical literacy, and only 25% are on the level higher than the second level, whereas the lowest level is demonstrated only by 4% of the population of Kazakhstan, whereas on the other hand, it's probably a good sign, but since we are at the very bottom of the skills of the highest level is really of our concern. It's really upsetting because the situation itself is maybe very similar to that in OECD countries, because high-level skills. Sorry? So this is the elite, and this is the driving force of every country. But of course, we at the same time see that still we have to enhance our potential.
Speaking about the learning and education, let me just show you that in Kazakhstan, the growth of the level of education has a positive impact on the level of skills. The higher is education, the more scores you get in learning. Like reading skills, the same trend is observed in OECD countries and in Kazakhstan. In the OECD countries, the growth is a bit more substantial versus in Kazakhstan. And 56 points for Kazakhstan, but the highest gap between OECD countries and Central Asian country is probably the level of high school education, secondary education. The difference between masters and bachelors, Kazakhstan 5 times is the gap between people who graduated from the secondary school. and the losses begin, the gap starts forming in the high school or secondary, at the end of the secondary school. Well, these results cannot be extrapolated to the current system of education. As you know, we looked at several different generations and make conclusions based on different cross sections of different generations. Now, the OECD countries, the tertiary education availability seriously improves population skills. You can see that CD up to 291 points. This is the growth. This is on average, the growth is about 61 points. In Kazakhstan, this growth is only 18 points. And what's amazing to us, what's really amazing, the population of skills who have only 9 classes of education, those are slightly better versus of the similar group in the OECD countries, but getting the high education, they are lagging behind by 34 points. What does it actually say? It says that the secondary education and the post-Soviet Union, well, post-Soviet Union countries, secondary education was at a pretty good level, and it never lagged behind higher education, but vocational secondary training and technical training, vocational training, they do not allow any skills of the advanced level. This is probably typical. Maybe we should be looking at this phenomena not just in Kazakhstan only, but across all of the former Soviet Union countries. I think we have some sort of a joint feature like that. So a third level and second level, even having the secondary education, cannot get to the second level. In the OECD countries, the second level enables you to go to level 3. Your time limit is only 15 minutes, so please wrap up. I'll be very quick, very quick. You only have 2 minutes left. Yes, please. Here, I'd like to tell you that yet another important aspect which we need to pay attention to, like the reading skills in the OECD countries, are lower with age. With the age, this means that the younger population is more involved in getting new skills. The system of education is delivering social role. In Kazakhstan, the situation is somewhat different. You can see that the age has almost no impact on the skills level, or there is only insignificant growth. And if you take a look at the OECD trend towards the reduction, that with the age, the skills level declines, we can assume that our younger generation with the age will be losing its competencies. And by the age of 50 or 60, they'll be showing worse results versus today. Of course, this is really scary. This is the information that our policymakers need to pay some serious attention to and use it to update our policy. And also, yet another important feature, none of the age groups with a high education in Kazakhstan does not show any skills above level 2, while in the OECD countries, almost all of the age groups are above level 2. So here I would like to show you rural versus urban population. You can see the difference remains regardless of the level of education, the comparisons between the levels of education. What does it actually say? It says that in the cities, in the urban areas, you have more opportunities to learn new skills, to do some continuous education, to apply those skills, versus in the rural areas. Let me skip it. Labor skills. So the labor skills, the educational skills turn into the labor skills. Kazakhstan has the same picture. Please pay attention that the increase in math literacy related to the increase of the hourly wages. On average, in the OECD countries, but very little. But the impact of education, the number of years of education has an impact on your ability to find any job in Kazakhstan. I think this is yet another peculiar feature of the former Soviet Union countries, because we have similar features, some similar characteristics. So here I would like to make several conclusions. First of all, employed population shows the greater level of skills versus unemployed economically inactive population. In the OECD countries, it's the same trend, but you can see the clear difference between urban and rural areas in Kazakhstan that is typical for various categories, regardless of the level of education, and remains. The increase in skills between categories of employed and unemployed is not as substantial as in the OECD countries. Okay, here I would like to draw your attention to the economically inactive population. People have their own reasons not to be involved with the labor market, to remain unemployed, but 60% of people have some proper reasoning, like they take care of family or house keeping or students and so on. Of course, we can speak for quite a long time about the survey itself. It basically provided a lot of luggage to make some administrative or policy decisions. My time is almost up, but all of this information will be given to the UNESCO office in Almaty. I think Mir Gul will be able to share with you these slides, so thank you very much for your attention. If you have any questions, I'll stand ready to take those. Thank you, Miriam. Yes, we will surely share these presentations with all of the participants. This presentation is going to be made available to you and all of the questions. So we'll take questions after all of the presentations, but if you have any questions which you might be able to respond to in our chat, so please do so that everyone can see. For the next presentation, let me give the floor to Mr. Nurlan Umurov, Vice Minister of Education and Science of the Kyrgyz Republic. Mr. Umurov, the floor is yours. Hello, distinguished participants of our today's meeting. Let me provide you with a brief update, a brief overview. Just a minute. Can you see my screen now? Mirgul, can you see the screen? Not yet, but we could see that you're trying to share it.
Возможно, вам нужно, наверное, именно на презентацию нажать. Сейчас видно. Просим вас.
Okay, now it's visible. Please make it full screen. Okay, let me get down to my presentation. On the slides, I will share with you some information where legislation-wise, we cover the aspects of the adult education, what are the specific norms or provisions of the law, and also a little bit of those trends where we establish the principles for the lifelong education for the adults. First of all, within the law itself, the law on education, this particular notion or the definition of additional education for the adults, well, basically to ensure the universal and fair quality education, encouraging possibilities for the lifelong education. The same law of the Kyrgyz Republic establishes some of the key points for the preparation, continuous education, everything that is being made via all types, all levels of education, via all different types of educational organizations. Also, the law on education, the law provides specific notions or definitions of the education for adults, and it also specifies the principles and the process of continuous education, training or retraining, and plus there are some bylaws and regulations on vocational training where we also establish principles for the adult education or lifelong education. Well, via the formal education, within the provisions for the adult education, we do this using secondary, tertiary, and initial vocational training. And there are also various types of educational institutions that handle adult education. Basically, it's being organized via short-term training, crash courses, various types of continuous education courses. Here on the slide, I would like to give you some numbers, some idea about various types of systems of education. The preschool education in 1,497 preschool education institutions. There are 197,000 children. In 2,265 schools of the country, they teach 1.2 million students, school students. Vocational training, this is primary vocational training. We have about 30,000 students. Colleges, secondary vocational training, about 95,000 students, 153, and 73 of the country's universities. They educate about 116 higher education students. 116,000. So percentage-wise, amongst the students or trainees, well, primary vocational education, 10% of the population, 17 to 20, well, as a percent. Secondary vocational training, 24%. Universities, well, 6.5%, 26.5%. Normally, people age 17 through 24. Informal providers of education, well, they also need to operate within the frame of the law, but they operate autonomously since 2006. The role of a coordinator on the adult education is being handled by the Kyrgyz Association of Adult Education, the members of which include 12 adult training centers in the country's 7 provinces. We only have 7 provinces in this country. Since 2012, in the area of the adult education, we had about 1,000 providers of services on the form of various organizations. 2020, their number reached 2,100. Well, if we pay attention to some dynamic, well, according to the law, in order to organize various training courses, you need to get a license from the Ministry of Education. If you take a look at the dynamics, the highest peak for the license application, it was the years 2015, 2017, 2019. In 2020, the number of providers who organize various vocational training courses, formal and informal education, these numbers are slightly down. But this is because at this point of time, well, if we take a look at this time period, their numbers increased versus 2013. If we had 1,000 about 10 years ago, now their numbers increased by 100%. There are about 2,000 providers now. But also would like to mention what are the specific indicators, specifically what are the typical license applications, many of the providers. They organize various courses, they ask for licenses for various working professions, various continuous education, services, cooking, preschool education, and some other. The systemic issues in the area of additional education of adults in this country, well, there are certain issues related to the education of adults. The areas that we need to pay attention to: inadequate legal framework within which, well, at this point of time, we are trying to review all of the legal acts. So what we're doing right now is the inventory of law in the area of education and science in the country. We do have 6 laws covering that, and each article of these 6 laws is now being subjected to the very close scrutiny. And in the foreseeable future, we kind of hope that hopefully by the end of this year, we will review all of the laws that will include any new provisions, new principles for the development of education for adults. And of course, there will be some new additions. And hopefully we will provide the stronger foundation for the adult education. Also, one of the issues is lacking financing for the extra education of adults from the national budget. A lack of funding from the national budget, the lacking educational resources or qualified staff, inadequate mechanisms of partnership between formal and informal sectors of education, limited access to the extra education of the adults because of the limited numbers of providers who only deliver for the demanded profession, high demand professions. So basically, these are some of the aspects that we are looking at right now. Some of the problem zones, and on the other hand, there's some of the challenges we need to react to. So basically, after the inventory of the law, we're going to do some proper work in order to ensure the better coverage of the adult population in terms of education, and also in order to be able to expand the possibilities of the education of adults, expand the education of adults in order to achieve the lifelong education goal. Some of the other points that we put into today's strategy, well, basically it's already ongoing through various approvals. This is the strategy of education till 2040. So basically some part of the strategy already includes some of the adult education principles, specifically the education of adults in Kyrgyzstan by 2040. So basically, one of the objectives is the proper level of education that enables affordable education, lifelong education. This is a social investment. The availability of this education for all of the members of our society. So specifically based on this particular objective, in 2019, we developed this concept for the development of education and learning of adults in Kyrgyzstan. So we intend to review this, to update this concept and get it approved. So within the first 3-year plan, so it's 2021, 2022, we'll already get approved the reviewed and redesigned strategy for the education of adults. Also would like to note that back in 2019, this country also adopted the national system of qualifications. And the concept of the national system of qualification, it's been already approved. So as part of this concept, they approved the activity plan for the implementation of the concept system of qualification.
And additionally, we have already devised and adopted the national framework of qualification system. Therefore, in the national framework, we have pretty concrete results of education and learning on every level, both in the system of formal and informal education. And here, I also wanted to emphasize that in the framework of COVID-19 pandemic, we managed to implement several projects, particularly on the organization of the learning process and educational process on every level of our educational system. And for the first ever time in Kyrgyzstan, we developed all the necessary platforms to provide electronic learning resources for school children. We also created new approaches in the devising of the learning materials for the children. And during the peak of pandemic, and in our country it was June, July, August last year, when we conducted an educational campaign, and we launched and I would say successfully launched the centralized system on enrollment of our students to colleges and universities and institutes. Therefore, every student, every school child could send an application and be enrolled into a university or the institute online. And in addition, we also devised a lot of webinars in preparation to the new academic year on the learning of new skills in the use of digital technologies, both for the teachers and professors and the students. And also during pandemic, we launched jointly with our partners several projects, such as, for example, the platforms on providing the training courses for adults, particularly, for example, I can mention here a platform for disabled people on the web design, on software engineering, on web graphics. So such several projects were successfully implemented. And also during pandemic, it was necessary for us to organize the learning and educational process, especially for teachers and for adults. And to this end, we decided to launch local platforms, which enabled us to implement our digital skills for our everyday routine professional work. And in addition, I would like to add that our country officially did not participate in the survey of IPAAC, and nevertheless, according to the criteria, upon our own initiative, with the support of our partners, we also conducted a survey of, let's say, people between 16 to 60 years old. And we identified and evaluated their skills. More than 3,000 beneficiaries were participating in that survey. And according to the obtained results, we have identified that the majority of our adults do not have a decent level of reading literacy and mathematical literacy. The level of our skills and education of our population is lower than basic. This is the reason for which we are now intending to take relevant measures to organize on a system and complex level the system of ALE. And also, it is necessary for us, especially given that the digital technologies are being introduced very intensively now, according to the decree passed by the president of our country. And let's say the previous year is marked by digitalization of all countries in our region. This is why, in addition to standard functional skills, we will have to develop the special skills among all layers of our population of different levels, both in formal and informal education, making sure that the skills, especially digital skills, will be formed. This is it for me in brief. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much, Mr. Amurov, for your presentation and for the presentation of the current situation in Kyrgyzstan. Now we would like to pass over to the next country, Tajikistan. And the speaker of Tajikistan will be Babamurodov Mahmurod, who is the chief specialist of preschool and school education department in the Ministry of Education of Tajikistan. Please, the floor is yours. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. Do you hear me well? Mr. Amurov, could you please stop sharing your screen? And could you please remove your presentation? Yes, we hear you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, dear colleagues, dear participants of our today's conference. And we are really very glad to welcome you at this event. And I would like to say briefly on several issues. We will be focusing mainly on the professional training courses, especially vocational training. And at the same time, we would love to talk about the legislative acts and sub-laws that are regulating the education for adults. We have such sub-laws and normative acts in Tajikistan. Their number is sufficient. For example, we can start talking about the law on education of adults of the Republic of Tajikistan. There is also the state program on the qualification enhancement, which will be in force until 2022. The strategy of the development of our education, which was adopted by the College of the Ministry of Education. And there was also the national standard of the higher professional vocational training in the Republic of Tajikistan, and the order of enrollment of the participants into short-term courses of vocational training in the Republic of Tajikistan. And I would say that it is also based on the state educational standards, classifications of various areas of activity, tendencies, and the specializations of professional and vocational training, concepts, strategies of various educational programs for adults, and the provisions of such education. And talking about the vocational training in Tajikistan, in addition, we have the primary and vocational training colleges where we train professionals for the Republic of Tajikistan for our labor market. In state-owned and private educational facilities during the short-term professional training courses from 1 month to 6 months. We are training specialists on technical, technological, economic areas, as well as for learning languages and driving cars. Right now, there are 35 centers of ALE under the Ministry of Education, Migration and Employment in Tajikistan, and there are 4 centers of vocational training in such districts and cities as Khurasan, Nurabad, Muminabad, Nurike, under the institutes. And we also have short-term learning courses under 18 educational establishments, mainly vocational facilities, and there are 58 of them under the primary professional educational facilities and 423 under the civil organizations in the open joint stock companies and the union of automobile drivers. And on a yearly basis, we are also training personnel in tourism and in service sector. And in general, more than 100,000 young people get an educational certificate. Ministry of Education and Science of the Republic of Tajikistan, to secure the working professions for the citizens of our country jointly with VOLLIP to curtail poverty, established 4 centers of professional learning in Nurikie, in Muminabad, Khurasan, and Rasht, and they are training during such short-term training courses the students who will acquire 15 various professions. And upon completion of this implementation term, the group on the working group on the project implementation of the program on professional literacy for the sake of poverty curtailing in Tajikistan, according to the order of the Ministry of Education and Sciences of the Republic of Tajikistan that was passed on the 3rd of May 2018, is a training specialist for the primary professional vocational training, as well as the center of Nurek City under the State Pedagogical University, Muminabadsky Center, and the Kulabsky State University. Thanks to small grants of the project of higher education development, we also conducted short-term professional vocational courses to train the waitresses, the operators of PC, the cooks, and the people who were learning foreign languages. And of course, when the students finished such courses, training courses, they were awarded certificates. And in the framework of the program on vocational training, jointly with the German Institute of Vocational Training, the ALE and FUTI program under the National University signed a memorandum on cooperation, joint cooperation with the GIGI organization for staff members of the university who were participated in various seminars and trainings which were dedicated to the enhancement of our vocational potential. According to Article number 4 of the law of the Republic of Tajikistan on education of adults, the main purpose of such education is expansion of the choice and satisfaction of the needs of the adults in education, as well as provision of conditions for the personal growth and expansion of the participation of adults in educational processes, as well as satisfaction of the needs of the adults when choosing various profession skills and competences or enhancement of their qualification, as well as establishment of the conditions for recognition of competences, knowledge, and skills of adults, irrespective of the place or time of their acquisition. I can also enumerate probably some other aspects of ALE. And there is also Article number 11 of our law on education, which is specifying various types of education. Which identify the various international and national educational programs for adults. And in the educational center, a social entrepreneurial center, as well as some daughter branches and the training centers under the various factories and plants and educational and production centers, short-term learning courses, the facilities for retraining of the personnel, of enhancement of qualification and requalification of personnel are also put in place according to article number 24.
Официального образования взрослых и их объединение осуществляет свою работу с учетом интересов.
Construct and devise their work, taking into consideration the needs of the population, and they are training the professionals in the healthcare system. They are also training people who lost their jobs, households, people who are individual entrepreneurs, or people who are getting back to their professional activity after a very long interval, migrants who returned from other countries or regions, or who entered into our country for permanent residence, or people who would love to change their area of activity or their place of residence. And you know that we had a very difficult situation last year, and for different reasons, we suspended the operations of various educational facilities due to pandemic of COVID-19, and we switched to online education. And for some period of time, we closed down everything for a very strict quarantine. And of course, COVID-19, of course, to resolve this problem, we had to take some additional measures so that COVID-19 pandemic will not be widely spread, like in many countries of the world where the number of dead persons amounted to hundreds and thousands. And now everything is more or less back to normal, and we are already operating. All our educational facilities are operating as usual. And during the last several years in Tajikistan, we adopted very important documents that laid down a very resilient foundation for the development of education. We passed the law of Tajikistan on education, the program on the state system and education in the area of human rights in Tajikistan. And on the basis of these documents, many state bodies and civil societies have already started working. We have already also published the textbooks for universities, for law enforcement authorities, and for secondary schools. We also adopted the concept of the National School of the Republic of Tajikistan, as well as the national concept of upbringing in Tajikistan. And innovative practices in the area of education is implemented in the majority of Tajik schools. And the main focus is made on the mastering of information on some topics in areas of civil education as well. And this model is almost fully reflected in our curricula and textbooks. And of course, we are also teaching the basics of the government and the human rights and legislation. And the peculiarity of this particular model is that the students are independent workers, and they work in various sectors of economy, in state bodies, in business structures, in non-government organizations, and in civil organizations. This is the reason for which such civil education is more focusing on their professional activities, and it has a very strong moral load. And these models in the process of civil education in primary and secondary and tertiary professional schools, and the education of adults along life, taking into consideration peculiarities of their environment from the point of view of the subject matter, of the content, and different interpretation and perception.
Basically, the country that is striving for democracy, We need to systematize and standardize these processes, specifically with the involvement of civil society organizations, and also to be able to provide such educational services. Thank you. Thank you very much to the Ministry of Education and Science of Tajikistan. Thank you very much for your presentation. And now I would like to move to the next country presentation. Well, the next in line is Turkmenistan. Distinguished Mr. Kurlia Rasulov, the floor is yours. Kurlia Rasulov, he represents the Ministry of Education of Turkmenistan. Hello, hello, distinguished participants. Can you hear me? Yes, we can hear you well. Please proceed. Hello, distinguished participants of sub-regional consultation. My name is Gulnar Bagurova. I'm the head of the Department of International Cooperation of the Ministry of Education of Turkmenistan. To begin with, I'd like to express my appreciation to the organizers of this event, UNESCO Cluster Bureau in Almaty, and I'd like to wish all of the participants of the sub-regional consultation a very productive work. Today's event will play a significant contribution, will provide a significant contribution to the development of education in our countries. As you know, the sub-region of Central Asia includes Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, and Kyrgyzstan. Like in all the countries of this region, the development of education, specifically education and learning of adults, is one of the key areas in the policy of Turkmenistan. This is being handled under the management of our distinguished President Gurbanguly Berdimuhamedov. The availability of human capital is the main advantage of every country, which depends on the level of education of its citizens. That's why from the very first days of its rule, our distinguished president is paying special attention to the development of education in Turkmenistan. A lot of success has been achieved in the area of international cooperation and education. We are one of the key partners of our country is UNESCO. One of the most important areas of partnership with UNESCO is education. And the key advantage is expansion of cooperation in the area of science and education. Right now, the Ministry of Education of Turkmenistan is having active cooperation with UNESCO on the issues of creating UNESCO departments or chairs in our educational institutions, and also inclusion of a number of our schools into the associate system of UNESCO. A lot of work is being done in Turkmenistan to improve national system of education, to develop science in order to get them to the level of the advanced countries of the world. For the more detailed introduction into the system of education of Turkmenistan, I'd like to pass the floor to the representative of the Department of International Cooperation of our university, Mr. Turle Rasulov. Hello, hello, distinguished colleagues. Can you see my presentation? Yes, we can see your presentation. Can you make full screen, please?
Уважаемые коллеги, тогда приступим.
Distinguished colleagues, let us start with the presentation. Right now, the education of adults in Turkmenistan is handled by the country's universities, vocational training schools, also primary vocational training schools, higher educational institutions. We have the continuous education courses. Apart from the governmental educational institutions in Turkmenistan, we have a large number of private educational institutions in which the adults are provided the educational services. specifically the short-term courses, various continuous education courses. Right now in Turkmenistan, countrywide, we have 60 primary vocational training schools, 180 vocational training schools. The vocational training and continuous education of adults is quite developed. There are 60 schools that handle vocational training, specifically they relate to various ministries in the country. According to the approved standards for the primary vocational training, education is being done based on 480 professions. The term of education from 1 to 1.5 years. The graduates get certificates and diplomas. Also, there are short training courses available with a training duration up to 6 months. The graduates of these courses are being issued certificates. Vocational training in Turkmenistan, we have 42 vocational schools, and according to the approved standards for the vocational school training, the training is being done in 200 specialties with the average period of training from 2 to 4 years, and the graduates get the respective diplomas. Higher education in Turkmenistan and this area, Turkmenistan, we have 20 higher education institutions of civil type. According to the approved standard of education of Turkmenistan, training is done on more than 400 specialties with a specialization in the two-level bachelor and master degree system. The bachelor and master system, bachelor's is 4 years, from master's 1 to 2 years. Specialty training can last up to 5 years. Graduates being issued diplomas on higher education. The number of credits applied is according to the international standards. The system of education in Turkmenistan, 240 credits in master's courses, from 60 to 120 credits. Specialized professions, 300 credits, 60 credits per each year of training. The post-diploma education, postgraduate studies in Turkmenistan, the post-university education is handled by the Academy of Science of Turkmenistan, where training of various specialties is being done through the postgraduate studies program. The training period up to 3 years. The PhD training courses are now being developed. Speaking about some of the key priorities of the country in the area of education of adults, we must note the following points. Right now in Turkmenistan, we're doing a stage-by-stage process to switch to Bologna system of education. Many countries' universities already fully migrated to the Bologna system. The education is handled according to the international standards of education. Number 2, in Turkmenistan, we have the activity plan to include the country's universities into the listings of the world's leading universities 2021-2024. According to the plan, we're developing curriculum for PhD training, and consistent steps are being made to implement the PhD training courses. The impact of COVID-19 or pandemics on the system of education in Turkmenistan. From the initial days of the pandemics in Turkmenistan, systemically we organized some work in order to prevent from the spread of the infections in the country. Ministry of Education of Turkmenistan introduced a number of documents to regulate the educational process in the conditions of pandemics. The Ministry of Education of Turkmenistan approved the temporary organization of educational process and vocational training. Various types of vocational training schools and secondary schools, the measures were taken to organize the temporary educational arrangements. School curriculum is only handled in a strict compliance with the sanitation and hygiene requirements, compliance with the required social distancing between students. Training shifts were divided into several shifts. Educational institutions with a large number of students, the groups have been divided into smaller subgroups. In the higher educational institutions, the purposes of doing the sanitation and disinfection, the training is done using the longer respites. longer breaks. Also, the system of civil education in Turkmenistan. We're gradually switching, migrating to the Bologna system, Bologna Accords. Annually, the Ministry of Education, looking at the labor market, would provide the listings of specialties required, and based on which the country's vocational schools would implement new specialties. The country is doing consistent activities in order to implement the long-distance training. Right now, all of the competitions and contests are handled remotely. Our universities do scientific online meetings and cooperation with various international universities. Speaking about the perspective of sub-regional cooperation, we must note the following. Ministry of Education of Turkmenistan, based on the policy of open doors, handled by our distinguished president Gurbanguly Berdimuhamedov, is open for the mutually beneficial and productive cooperation at the sub-regional level. We believe that the following areas are more high potential areas for the sub-regional cooperation areas. And with the background of rapidly developing technologies, one of the areas of sub-regional cooperation is exchange of digital technologies, strengthening the legal framework of digital technologies and strengthening their security. This is the issue of survival in the future. Neutral Turkmenistan is actively participate in sustainable development goals. We need to establish the sub-regional cooperation amongst universities in order to achieve the sustainable development goals, specifically organizing joint online consultations and meetings. Number three, improved academic cooperation is also one of the priority areas for cooperation. We suggest that we organize exchange of professors, faculty members from the universities of the high qualification, organizing online lectures and workshops, the participation of international professors. Thank you for your attention. Thank you. Thank you for your presentation, Ministry of Education of Turkmenistan. We would like to thank you. And now we would like to move to the last country presentation. This is Uzbekistan. Now I would like to give the floor to Mr. Muradullah Holmuhamedov, Deputy Minister of High and Secondary Vocational Training of the Republic of Uzbekistan. Mr. Holmuhamedov, the floor is yours. Thank you, Mirgul. Hello, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Let me congratulate you on this very good event. This is the very good online audience. I'm very pleased to be with you in a single virtual space. I think this is a very good meeting for sharing experience, and I think we can identify the vectors for some future joint activities, and I'd like to wish us all good luck and success. In order to improve the better internet connection, I will temporarily deactivate my video, but I will reactivate it again as I finish my presentation. Well, I will briefly go through what are the changes in Uzbekistan, specifically in the development of learning and education of adults. Adult learning education, ALE. Yeah, as you know, in Uzbekistan, Uzbekistan is having some profound reforms in all areas of education, social, democratic, society, and education is one of those priorities. We have established a brand new infrastructure for the development of education. This including the preschool education, secondary education, vocational training, higher education. Specifically, all of this are managed separately, including the Ministry of Innovations, which is after vocational training or science education. Now, what's changed? What's new? Specifically with regard to education of adults. Number one, The notion of ALE has been included into the Sector of Education Development Plan for 2019-2023. Number two, in 2020, we passed the new law where for the first time, we reflected on the lifelong education. 2019, we adopted the new system of vocational training that includes all three levels, all three tiers of the International Standard Classification of Moscow. This is tier 3 of the vocational training program, primary, level 4, level 5, and level 6, the integration with bachelor's education, because vocational training, this is the associate degree that requires some primary education, and plus the new initiative, that those who successful graduate from vocational schools, level 5, we unable to continue training from the year 2 of baccalaureate, bachelor's training. Well, apart from the governmental educational institutions, colleges, and others, plus additional unemployed training centers, the expansion of the legal framework in providing preferences specifically for the accreditation of non-governmental educational institutions and the training in the non-formal or informal sector by the governmental non-commercial organizations, culture centers. So there is a specific separate program like this for the development of vocational training, specifically ALE. In line with this, we developed the new regulatory framework with implementation of the mechanism of acknowledging validation of qualifications because of the adoption of the national system of qualification. Again, this is the novelty for the vocational training and education in Uzbekistan. Which are the results of this reform? Now, just a little bit of stats. I think those who need this, you will be able to do some analysis and interpret this. Just wanted to say this. Such a serious dynamic for the development of the network of educational institutions, higher education, non-governmental educational institutions. Back in 2016, we only had 77 higher educational institutions. Right now, their numbers reach 132. And this is not the end of story. This is just the beginning. As you know, till 2017, we had no distance learning, but right now the distance learning is available. Now the 71 areas, there's daytime education, the long distance learning, 18 is evening department education, and we have more trainees, and we have the faculty members who handle this. So basically, the problem is to ensure not just the quantity, but quality as well. The next slide. This is the whole new network of educational institutions for vocational training, specifically vocational schools. Those are adopted for level 3 MSCO. Colleges is level 4. Technical vocational schools is number 5. We'll launch the new educational programs this year, which are in line with these. So what are the key challenges? Everyone knows this, the lower coverage, low penetration of population, the adult population, specifically senior citizens, unequal distribution of the network of educational institutions, lacking mechanisms for collecting data for the analysis purposes. Well, we also acknowledge that there is some lack of the interagency cooperation or interdepartmental cooperation. We only include the classification of specialists, people who work with adults, and the lacking system of training qualified professors or teachers. This is or instructors. This is one of the priorities of our education programs to implement the extra modules in order to be able to expand the team of adult teachers or adult professors. Inadequate involvement of cultural institutions is also a problem.
Especially museums and theaters that could be of particular interest for adults because the incentives were pretty high there. It's one of the unused resources for us. And of course, we are very much concerned with the insufficient number of studies in the area of education. However, we are also very grateful to the UNO organizations in Uzbekistan because there was one very good project launched there on the development of education in Uzbekistan, particularly ALE. And we are thinking of expanding the infrastructure of ALE by the organization of training courses for adults on the basis of vocational educational establishments. And we have already introduced the principle of the open doors. Let's say that in the first half of the day, the students usually have their classes, and in the second half of the day, everybody who is willing to acquire additional skills, knowledge, or competences, they have a full range of various learning and educational programs for them. And we are also very seriously intending to start the development of educational facilities in remote and rural areas where we have a lot of problems due to some subjective and objective reasons. And of course, lifelong learning also, we should be focused on the vulnerable layers of population, those people who are trying to learn more, who would like to acquire some additional skills, particularly, for example, digital skills. This area of activity is taken very seriously. And of course, we need some government subsidies, some additional funds for ALE initiatives implementation. Therefore, we are intending to start the development of the informal educational sector represented by the private companies. And now we are budgeting several articles in the budget for the next year, which will cover ALE needs. And of course, we would like to have a very wide range of various courses of training, seminars, first and foremost on the health and healthy lifestyle. It's education, scientific research, which we deem to be very interesting, and we believe that it may be of enormous help for us. And of course, we will try to provide opportunities both to the state sector, government sector, and private sector to be as much involved into our sector of industry as possible. Now, with regard to COVID-19, there are some pros and cons. The negative aspects are related to the reduction of the revenues, especially in private sector, those people who were dealing with ALE programs. But at the same time, we are trying to get adapted to the new normal. But at the same time, there are a lot of positive things because now COVID boosted up the development of digital literacy of the population, the development of some new portals and resources, and as well as devising of the new programs and formats of educational programs, as well as enhancement of our digital literacy. And the best example of it is our today's online webinar. And what we have already done also, we have already translated into the Uzbek language the guidelines of UNESCO on the education of global citizenship. And this course is also included into the syllabus of the for the teachers training in their competence enhancement courses. And what else has already been done? As an example of innovations on the government level, we took a decision on the establishment of all the necessary conditions as well as legislative basis for organization of ALE in different forms. And in 2020, the national qualification system was adopted in Uzbekistan, which is streamlined with the European qualification framework, which implies and has a kind of legal way of validation of the qualifications of the population, which is getting formal or informal education. And more than 200 colleges all over Uzbekistan train, retrain, and improve competence of adults and try to get them adapted to the market relations and develop some additional skills. And there are several examples of such initiatives. And I would like probably to reiterate on it. It's, for example, introduction of the mechanisms, recognition and validation and accreditation of informal and informal education. It's conduct of regular sub-regional seminars and conferences. And our today's webinar is really very useful to us. And I will probably again, we'll thank Mirgul at the end of our today's webinar, because I believe that the training of competent, highly qualified personnel for the sector of ALE is really very important. And for this, we have the professors and the potential who can become the driving force of these reforms. And what is also necessary is to conduct joint sub-regional events, seminars. And there are some realities that we will need to get adapted to, and we have to continue self-development. And in this regard, our enhancement and the internationalization of education in Central Asia and the educational platforms that we are revisiting right now. We are really very glad that Afghanistan has got integrated into our community. We are really very glad to see Iran in our community as well. And I think that it was really a tremendous initiative of UNESCO, for which we're particularly appreciative, and cooperation in the area of research, as well as compliance to the international standards and other documents, and many other issues that I believe will be highlighted and dwelled on a little bit later in the framework of the practical tasks that we will be resolving. Again, I would like to thank everybody, all our friends, all our colleagues. Thanks a lot for your attention. Thank you very much, Mr. Muhamedov, and thanks a lot for your presentation. Now we will have several minutes. I would say that according to our agenda, we will have 10 minutes for a Q&A session on the country presentations. And I see several questions to the speaker from the Ministry of Education, Mr. Omurov, from the Ministry of Education and Science of Kyrgyzstan. And if you have distinguished participants questions to other speakers from other countries, please put down your questions in the chat of Zoom. Mr. Omurov, there are a couple of questions to you. The first question is on the approval of the strategy of education development for 2021 and 2040. And what will be the forecasted timelines of the approval of such strategy? And the second question is about the results of the survey of questionnaire that was conducted by the Ministry of Education on the PIAAC questionnaire. What were the results, and where can we familiarize ourselves with them? Mr. Nurlan Omurov, I hope that you're still with us. Maybe there are some other representatives of the Ministry of Education and Science of Kyrgyzstan who can entertain this question.
Я не слышу.
Well, I don't hear.
Я не слышу никого. Я думаю,
I don't hear anybody. I believe we can probably ask you to provide your answers in the chat, or probably we will ask you to provide the answers to these questions after today's webinar. Distinguished participants from the Ministry of Education and Science of Kyrgyzstan, I know that there are some participants. Please answer to these questions in the chat, then we are not going to delay our event any further. Here I see one more question, but it's not quite clear who this question is intended for. Probably it's a question to us. I'm sorry, I've lost this question a little bit. I'm going to track it down. Sorry, that was a question on whether or not there are any materials or guidelines on education for adults. Maybe if any concrete representative of our ministry has some guidelines, some other materials or instructions, please, could you please tell us if there are any guidelines or any materials on the improvement of VLE? If you have such documents, please share them with us, or maybe our colleagues from Lifelong Learning Institute will be able to entertain this question, or maybe representatives of our countries have some such materials. And there is one more question from the Ministry of Education to Tajikistan, whether or not the new concept of inclusive education in the Republic of Tajikistan, does it cover the adults as well? Mr. Babumorodov, Mahmoud, if you are still with us, could you please answer this question?
Есть ли у нас представители из Министерства образования?
Do we have representatives from the Ministry of Education and Science of Tajikistan?
Я вроде вижу, что
I
подключены.
see that you are online. Maybe you forget to turn on your mic.
Хорошо, возможно, есть какие-то технические.
Okay, maybe there are some technical problems that our participants have encountered. Then probably we are not going to delay any more our discussions. I'm sorry, is anybody sharing the screen? Chris Duke, could you please stop sharing your screen?
Здесь еще поступают у нас вопросы.
And there are some additional questions that are received in the chat.
Минуточку.
Just a second.
Завис экран.
Well, my screen is frozen. Sometimes we all face technical troubles. Probably.
Минуточку. Вот.
Okay.
Здесь также спрашивают.
There is a question in English.
Есть ли
If there are any mechanisms
регионального сотрудничества
for regional cooperation on a political level in the area of mutual education or exchange of the best practices and strategic activities exchange. Maybe representatives of the Ministry of Education
может поделиться?
will be able to comment on it.
Вопрос звучит таким образом еще раз. Есть ли
Again, I would like to repeat this question. Are there any mechanisms for regional cooperation on political level in the area of joint exchange of the best practices and strategic activities? Okay, Mirgul, if I may, I would like to comment on it very briefly. Yes, there are some such mechanisms. They do exist in the framework of political issues, and they are anticipating some international cooperation. For example, when we adopt joint projects, for example, in Almaty, we conducted recently a Digital Almaty Forum, and under the Eurasian economic space. And we were talking about some mechanisms of digitalization, for example, on how digitally we will be able and automatically check the credentials of all the graduates from various countries of the Eurasian Economic Union who are traveling between various countries. Of course, such mechanisms do exist, but talking about, let's say, international mechanisms, probably this is not a question to us. This is a question to our political decision makers. But of course, in some aspects, we do have tools of collaboration and integration between various countries of our region. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Do you hear me? Yes, please. Could you please ask a question again? Because there was a question to us, right? Unfortunately, I didn't hear it. I missed it.
Ой, извините.
I'm sorry. Yes, the question was about the concept of inclusive education. My understanding is that there is a new concept that is being drafted right now. And the question was whether or not ALE is already integrated into this concept. Yes, indeed, there was the first concept, and it was anticipating inclusive education, and based on it, we are drafting the second version of the concept. Both documents on inclusive education also underscore the education, further education, and learning of those kids who are now students of our secondary schools and their integration into professional life. And right now in this process, one of the educational establishments, which is a primary vocational school, is specialized on training of such kids who have just finished secondary schools. And in the tertiary educational establishments, we do everything possible so that these kids, as soon as they get their secondary education, will be able to obtain vocational training. Thanks a lot for your reply. And I see also representatives of the Ministry of Education and Science of Kyrgyzstan. And in the chat, they are answering to the previous question. Unfortunately, they did not manage to answer due to technical hiccups. And I see that they also sent to us a link which contains the results of the study conducted in Kyrgyzstan on the evaluation of skills of adults according to PIAC criteria. And Christine, thanks a lot because you sent to us the results of this study. Okay, maybe some other representatives of other ministries have some additional comments or answers to the previous questions. And as to the regional cooperation, I would also like to add that UNESCO Cluster Bureau also conducts, and we will continue conducting similar events, such as, for example, exchange of experience on various platforms, and also exchanges on any type of questions related to education, including ALE. And I believe that today, just like all representatives of different countries are very actively involved into our discussion, I hope they will continue such involvement as well in the future. If there are not any other questions, we are going to break for 5 minutes, and please don't leave us because after the break, we will have an even more interesting part, the presentations of civil society organizations, as well as a generic presentation on the key priorities, on key challenges. Therefore, please don't leave us. And let's break for just 5 minutes. And during the break, you will watch a video about ALE that was shot by our Bangkok office. It is in English, but there will be subtitles in Russian. But if during the break you will not be able to watch this video, don't worry. We will send a link to this video to you. And in addition, I also recall that we would like to make one more group photo, because some representatives of the countries and many participants joined our meeting a little bit later after we have already made the first group photo. So please turn on your cams right now if you want to be on this group picture.
And I'd like to ask colleagues, please take a screenshot, please, again. 1, 2, 3. I hope colleagues have been successful. Thank you very much, everyone. I'd like to announce a break now. Please don't go too far. We'll continue. Thank you. 5 minutes.
Lives. We are now living longer than ever before, with global life expectancy rising from 45 in 1950 to around 70 today. But when we look at the average person's life cycle, most of our opportunities for education and learning are confined to schooling during our childhood and adolescence. But in actual fact, we know that people have the potential to learn throughout their whole lives. We also know that formal education doesn't always work when it comes to preparing all of us for our entire lives. Education opportunity in the formal system is sometimes unequal, and many get left behind or left out along the way. About half of all public education resources in low-income countries are allocated to the 10% of students that are most educated, and UNESCO data exposes wide inequalities in provision. Without learning opportunities after school, there is no second chance or safety net for those that missed out. On top of that, UNESCO data confirms that approximately 758 million adults globally are unable to read or write, with 63% living in Asia. Global illiteracy costs more than $1 trillion a year worldwide, and there is an ever-increasing need for lifelong learning opportunities that support livelihoods, well-being, and sustainability across the globe. Despite this, and the fact that we live the majority of our life as adults, nearly half of countries worldwide spend less than 1% of their public education budget on adult learning. Today, the world is radically different. Technology is moving at a faster pace than ever before. An estimated 65% of children will end up in jobs that do not exist yet, and even further change may yet take place. Can formal schooling alone accommodate these shifts? The next generation may also face even greater challenges than we do now, from growing inequality to conflict, displacement, and climate change. It will take the sum of every human's potential to solve these problems for a better world. So what do you think the possibilities would be if we could extend education opportunities beyond just the formal stage? What if people were truly supported with endless opportunities to learn and grow, not just in school, but throughout their entire lives? Imagine what would happen if more than 7 billion people across the world were able to learn for life. What's the true potential of lifelong learning for all of us and for our societies? Quality of life for all of us would improve. Lifelong learning would allow people to learn and develop themselves throughout their whole lives, leveraging the full potential of our 7 billion minds to help make the world a better place, whilst improvements in literacy would open doors to better lives. Lifelong learning would give people a second chance when they miss out on formal education. Those who did not have access to schools can still get a training certificate or obtain vocational skills to improve their livelihood, and can learn life skills to support happier and healthier living. When people can have jobs that they love, it allows them to make positive impacts to the society and contributes to a happier community. When one happy community combines with another, they make the world a better place to live in.
Уважаемые коллеги, я надеюсь,
Dear colleagues, I hope everyone is back from the break and we can continue now and move to the next session.
следующая сессия у нас
Our next session is this is session 2, the presentations by the representatives of CSO and civil society organizations. This particular session is going to be moderated by Mr. Rashan Baratov, the manager of the regional programs of DOV International Central Asia. So I'd like to pass the floor moderation to Rashan. Hello, thank you very much again for this opportunity to participate in this conference and be co-organizers with our long-term partners in this region, with whom we've been successfully organizing lots of different events and conferences and share very useful information. Well, in my turn, within the framework of this session, I'm very pleased to introduce my colleague, the Regional Director of DOV International Office in Central Asia, who is going to introduce several results of the comparative analysis of the policies of the countries of Central Asia in the area of adult learning and education. Dr. Calbert, the Regional Director of DVV International Central Asia.
Thank you very much, Ravshan, Mirgul. One more time. For me, I always have to make the choice between languages, but as I'm still a little bit more at home in the English, I have decided to make my presentation in English. It's available in Russian, and I'm sure the colleagues will just share the necessary information in the chat where the Russian speakers can be looking at the Russian version of my presentation in parallel. Let me share my screen for the English one. I hope it's visible. And I should go to presentation mode. Yes, I hope it can be seen well. So I am today only the presenter, and also representing the commissioner and to some extent, of course, the owner of some research results, which have been compiled over the past year by colleagues from the adult learning and education sector. These are the results of a comparative analysis DVV International decided to commission to have conducted on the 3 Central Asian project countries that we work in. Those are Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, and Uzbekistan. Some more background on our objectives behind it and on this process, this project intervention itself. So the idea was to explore the current situation of the framework conditions in the AIL sector in our 3 Central Asian project countries, to be able to make recommendations to promote this sector further and to develop AIL, both to sector actors in the countries, very importantly, to decision makers, most of all, but also to get some input for our own work, which we were in the process of some strategic planning for the upcoming project phase, which has actually started this year. The study was conducted by 2 teams of consultants. There is a set of country level reports that was written by national local experts from the 3 countries themselves. And then a 4th document, which is really a synthesis taking more of a regional meta-level perspective based on those 3 country reports. And this 4th one was compiled by a team of 2 international consultants. I think all or most of the authors are also here with us in the meeting today. So it is only my role to present some key aspects of their work. And I hope you can come in should there be any questions or remarks later on as well. We conducted this study against the background of the pandemic. This wasn't part of the plan, but it had been scheduled for last year. So the research had to mainly be done by way of desk reviews, but also some expert interviews were conducted mostly in remote format. And it took place between March and June last year. You can see some of the main research subjects in more detail on the slide. So really all the aspects of the legal framework, the policy framework for AIL, the situation of financing in the AIL sector, the institutional environment in place, and also the availability of statistical information on AIL. Funding was coming from our main core donor, the German Federal Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development. To start out with, before I focus in on our Central Asia study, I just decided to also have all of us that we have come together here today around developing the AIL sector be inspired a little bit by yet another paper that came out last year. If colleagues allow, it was actually compiled by the International Council for Adult Education. And this is really part of my slides on the benefits and role of AIL, which I think should motivate all of us to strive for the further development of this sector, including for the Central Asian region, because it offers individuals the opportunity to equip themselves to meet their needs for professional development, which is often seen in the forefront of the motivation to develop the AIL sector, but also for their personal growth. And through that, actually, the societies as a whole can be enabled to achieve peace and democracy, to become more inclusive, to strive towards gender equality, and to shape the future of work and of digital development as one part of present-day life as well, very importantly. And ALE does this by offering a wide thematic scope. It's adaptable to learners' needs and very flexible. It makes people aware of their own capacities and skills and helps them to develop them further. And it makes education accessible to them during the entire lifespan. And this should include also the marginalized groups, which are present in Central Asia as a region, of course, too, for example, in remote locations. So I just thought that this holistic view of the benefits of ALE were important to set the ground for the other results that I will present just now. And I can continue with the benefits that came out of our country studies, the way that the consultants saw them. As is often the case in some of the reports, this kind of twofold picture was presented of the economic benefits of ALE on the one hand. So it can help develop a workforce with higher and more relevant professional skills, thus reducing unemployment and poverty. It can help develop small businesses, provide people opportunities to do this and embark on that. And it can thus increase the state budgets on their part through higher tax deductions eventually. And on the social side of things, relevant for the entire society, ALE can help create a more tolerant society. It can increase community cohesion, lead to conflict prevention and peace. It can increase civic engagement of adults and young people, and it can improve such things as gender equality, public health, and the quality of life of people just in general. So this is the essence of some of the benefits that were really summarized once again by our consultants in their reports. Before also coming to some of the challenges, priorities for further actions, and concrete recommendations for cooperation on sub-regional level, I also wanted to highlight once again some of the achievements that are already in place. And yeah, for me, very interesting. Many of them were seen actually in the country presentations that were also held by our colleagues from the government institutions. So there is a certain level of recognition of ALE in legislative or policy and strategic documents. We've heard examples from basically all the countries. As for our 3 countries in focus, we have adult education recognized now in a more solid way in the new law on education in Uzbekistan since last year. We have a separate law on adult education, which was adopted in Tajikistan in 2017. And we have a separate section on adult education, which was recently integrated in Kyrgyzstan's National Development Strategy for 21 to 2040. And this is awaiting approval. We have heard and read once again in the Kyrgyz colleagues' answer that this is coming up. And I guess actors in the sector in Kyrgyzstan are all hoping for that, to basically continue their efforts on a more concrete and solid basis. We also have the participation of civil society actors in the sector as ALE providers, CSOs and NGOs, many of which are also our partner organizations. And they participate, some of them in state tenders to acquire public funding for their offers, and also in public-private partnerships to some extent and in some places to actually create offers targeting certain parts of the population. And there are several examples for that. I've just singled out a few of them here in brackets. Partner NGO of our Sabr in Uzbekistan, and there are several member centers of the Kyrgyz Adult Education Association as well, who have had such successful experience, and mainly working with local government institutions or businesses in some places. plus a current initiative in piloting the community learning center model in Tajikistan, which involves the cooperation between DVV International as an international NGO, local NGOs, local municipalities, and then the Ministry of Labor to actually create model CLCs. There are initial steps towards the institutionalization of training offers for adult educators themselves in all three countries, as well as some groundwork and concrete piloting initiatives and steps taken towards the recognition of prior learning coming from ALE as well. So there is potential to develop this basically in all the three countries that were studied in the legislative and policy documents. Now, coming to some of the challenges, which I decided on the slide to rather basically shape them into priorities for further action. As was also pointed out by some of the previous speakers, we do still face issues with access to adult learning and education. And it is still a very important aim to ensure equitable and fair access, which leaves no one behind, which also encompasses the more marginalized groups of the population. And this can partly be related to the fact that public awareness is sometimes still relatively low on the role of ALE, on the benefits that it can have among the wider public and thus the learners, but also among some of the decision makers themselves. So this is also an area that one could continue working on. Another aim could probably be to increase and improve the mechanisms and sources of funding for ALE programs. And I'm very glad that I saw such a point also already being raised in some of the previous speakers who come from that side of the spectrum of potential funders for ALE, be it with state providers, government institutions, be it with non-governmental providers of ALE. And there are examples for that, but this definitely has to be expanded and built on in the view of our consultants. There also are still issues with the quality of programs and the effectiveness of management in the sector, which can be seen as connected to the capacities of the staff working in the ALE sector, with providers as well as with the relevant institutions, in the field of policy making. And this can be improved in the view of our authors and should be improved, and some initial steps are definitely also already being taken towards this. And then finally, when it comes to the governance and coordination mechanisms that are in place, our authors still saw mainly an issue on the part of coordination, really, because the relevant actors dealing with the ALE sectors in the countries come from different ministries. They can come from different agencies or levels of the executive bodies. And oftentimes a kind of central institution to really provide overview, orientation, and coordinate the implementation of ALE initiatives is lacking. So this is something that is also, as we know, in the plans for some of the countries studied, and it can provide very big benefits in our view if this could be improved. Finally, connected to this last point that I mentioned, there is also the potential to create alliances then and more systematic cooperation in the view of our authors between government agencies and non-governmental actors on the other side, including also private actors such as private businesses, for example, in order to work towards improving the framework conditions for ALE in a more systematic manner. Yes, COVID-19, as it has also been, of course, a standard part, something to really reflect upon once again. Now that this last year has passed with some of the previous presenters, I also basically took a minute to think of how I would build it into this presentation. Would I build it into it? The study that I'm talking about was taking place during the early stages of the pandemic, and of course it was itself affected by it. as I already said. And yes, the consequences that it will have for the sector and for the AIL providers, for the learners, of course, themselves cannot still be estimated fully. It's the crisis is still continuing. But I wanted to draw your attention also to some of the mitigation initiatives, really, that we have come across as DVV International. And the previous presenters have drawn our attention to some of the initiatives taken by the governments and the state institutions, while at the same time, of course, the CSOs and NGOs providing AIL in the different locations were also faced with the problem of how to continue their work and how to react to the crisis. And we have really seen some very inspiring initiatives. I'm not going to go much into detail here because time might not allow, but I wanted to draw the attention to initiatives to continue the professionalization of adult educators themselves. On the one hand, training programs designed to achieve this have really sprung up in all three countries, and we have come across them and partly supported them. Adult educators have had such a rising curve of learning themselves and spontaneously adapted to the need to actually use online platforms and digital content and approaches to reach their learners in all three countries. And some concrete examples have just been digital offers produced in vocational training for IT literacy, for example, and entrepreneurship training in Uzbekistan that we have seen among state partners as well. The culture centers that we work with, just as one example, but also among some of the NGOs in Kyrgyzstan, for example, a very interesting so-called laboratory of innovative education, which was mainly targeting young people to enable young educators themselves to actually produce digital content. So, and we have just seen that there is potential that can be leveraged, and that AIL itself is also a very important factor actually in crisis response and in mitigating the crisis consequences that should definitely be kept in mind and be supported also in future. After this brief excursion, into some reflection of those examples that we have seen come up during the crisis, I will conclude with my two final slides and really now come to the synthesis report that was part of our initiative last year, compiled by the two consultants who basically already had the country reports at hand and had the task to look at potential for sub-regional cooperation, single out some of the commonalities in the status quo of the development of the AIL sector right now in our three project countries, and provide recommendations to ourselves and any other relevant actors in the sector, including the decision makers who are with us today. So they came up with a list of 9 recommendations, of course, being elaborated upon in the reports, and they will be shared with you after this event. They will be part of the material. So I will just basically make you aware of what those 9 key recommendations have been. The first 2 of them, in my view, really frame the rest, and they provide a kind of, let's say, framework orientation in terms of what kind of objectives one could strive to reach, including through sub-regional cooperation. So the first one is to leverage the structural support to embed AIL as a subsector in the education systems in the countries even more firmly and deeply, and doing this from a lifelong learning perspective. Connected to this, the need to still strengthen AIL further in acts, laws, regulations, and of course budgets. As someone said before, all of this will cost money, and that this could be done by methods of peer review and consultation, sub-regional exchange of experience, by engaging all the key actors from the field, really. some of the concrete processes that, well, all of us are already part of and that are going on. Today's meeting is one element of one of them, are of course the CONFINTEA process, and closely connected to the SDG process and the SDG agenda, Sustainable Development Goals, and their achievement. So those are two very key processes that point to the importance of ALE. And to the need to really support it and develop it further, taking an intersectoral approach. And that will also keep bringing actors from the entire region together anyway as part of the process, which is a potential that in the view of our authors should be leveraged and should be used to the fullest. And then to complete the list, some of the more, let's say, concrete elements that still call for further work at country level, but could benefit from regional exchange and potentially platforms for regional exchange of experience that could be created, is the need that really came up, first of all, from all the country reports to be able to acquire more relevant and broad statistics on the adult learning and education sector in order to enable its monitoring and evaluation and in the end informed decision-making on the sector in the future. This is really a challenge that is still visible in all the countries that were studied. The field of recognition, validation, and accreditation of prior learning, where, as I said, a very good groundwork is already in place and has been completed. And now that some countries might embark on basically creating mechanisms or rolling out based on the experiences they have made with initial pilots, it could also be very beneficial to keep exchanging on this topic at a regional level. Seventh point would be the potential establishment of ALE or lifelong learning governing or consultation bodies, which very much came out of the country reports as something that could still be done in addition to the institutions that are already there. But why not at the same time look at this from a regional lens and see whether such kind of platforms could be created, where this regional exchange could be institutionalized at least to some degree and made more regular with certain thematic focus that is as relevant for all the different countries in question. Not, of course, only concerning the 3 project countries as well, but the entire Central Asian region. And in this context, the 8th point, digitalization, could, of course, serve as one of the tools to be used for that. But at the same time, it's also one of the areas that could be developed further to basically, use its potential to benefit the ALE sector, but at the same time also, overcome some of the challenges that still exist and mitigate some of the consequences that might result from increasing fast-paced digitalization in terms of gaps between different population groups and access and in benefit that they can get from that. So this will certainly be a very important topic of mutual concern to keep exchanging on. And then last but not least, the rather concrete suggestion to look into the establishment of more learning cities in Central Asia, to basically, look at Central Asia also as an emerging learning region. And this also comes back to the connection to one of the existing UNESCO initiatives, of course, the UNESCO Global Network of Learning Cities. And it would, of course, be very interesting to have different cities, let's say in the different countries, embark on such an endeavor at the same time, and then be exchanging their experiences and learning as they might develop such projects. This was it. As I said, the reports will definitely be made available via our website as part of the conference material. And if authors and organizers allow, maybe also the very inspiring report on the future of ALE by IKE, if that is of interest as well. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Tekla, for a very comprehensive report. And I would like to draw the attention of our participants to some preliminary pre-publishing versions of these reports are already available. Therefore, you can already go through them, familiarize yourselves with them. These are some preliminary versions, both country reports and regional reports, and they will be available on our site. You will be able to download them. And the next speaker that I would like to introduce to you will represent one of the long-standing partners of BVV International in the Asian region. And it's the regional association that is uniting more than 200 organizations all over Asia, in the specializing in the ALE area. And Ms. Nasihochaeva, who is the member of the executive council of this organization, and she is going to talk about the experience of Central Asia. And if she is ready, I would love to turn the floor to her. I'm welcoming all participants of this meeting, and I'm really very glad to participate in this event. And I would like also to introduce some results that have already been conducted by all members of our council, and those who participated, and actually all the members of the council in Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, and Uzbekistan were involved into this work. And I would like to present the results of the work in this particular area. And I can share my screen. Or Mirgul, will you demonstrate my screen, share my screen? You can share your screen independently. Since my presentation is in English, I'm going to do it in English as well.
Region. I've been quite long with ASBE, and it's an honor for me to represent ASBE and also to vocalize the voice of ASBE members from 3 countries, namely Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, and Tajikistan. So making ALE work for marginalized communities. On February 22nd, we had a very nice meeting, online virtual meeting, which united ASBE members coming from Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, and Kyrgyzstan, and which gave us a very good interaction and also possibility to discuss very urgent and also very burning issues that are in common in all these 3 countries. So, and now you can see my screen, and as you can see, so here are the challenges which were met by all these 3 countries, and due to the pandemic, due to COVID-19, and as you can see, one of the biggest issues, it was transition from face-to-face to online education. So it meant that there were limited opportunity for ALE, and particularly all the members from 3 countries, they agreed that the quality of ALE is unsatisfactory, which means that compared to each other, all these 3 countries were not ready to face COVID-19, and particularly when there was a kind of lockdown and the schools stopped functioning. So it also brought lots of other issues. And particularly the ALE system was not prepared to that. The second one is non-availability of online courses. In some countries, there were a quick switch to some online courses, but in many cases, these online courses were not available for adult learning and education. The next point was that elderly population, they were left behind due to the limited knowledge and access to ICT. So if we know one of the slogans of the Sustainable Development Goals is no one should left behind. So therefore, we just thought that elderly population in this sense, they are very disadvantaged because they have very limited knowledge and access to ICTs. And particularly just, we know there are some centers for adult learning and for adult education, but due to COVID, they were not able to provide quick online courses to elderly population. Another important issue is which we tracked in all these three countries: lack of government financing and technical support to adult learning and education. So mainly in these periods, as we all remember, governments were focusing on providing basic and secondary and compulsory education. And of course, just adult learning and education was something that were paid less attention. So the next column represents another point that makes it very important. That is lack of training for IELTS trainers about online system of teaching. So basically, just we know that there are problems with internet. In some countries, there is limited access, but in some other areas, like in remote areas, there is no access to internet. And particularly, internet in some areas are really non-affordable because of the high internet costs. And therefore, the trainers, they lack trainings and they don't know how to lead online system of teaching and how to continue their teaching. So the second issue is non-availability of the devices for online education. Of course, just in big cities, you can find people with mobile phones or with smartphones. But when we are talking about the remote areas, about the rural areas, this is something that is not speakable. So, and particularly like computers, iPods, or just some other devices for online education, they are not available. So, of course, I assume that everybody would agree that in Central Asia, there is a lack of statistical data on adult education, adult learning and education. Particularly, so if there is a formal statistical data on formal education, then when we compare it with non-formal or informal education, then we can see that there is a huge gap between them. And we can see that lack of statistical data on IELTS is really just making it a big issue. And therefore, we can see that there should be some impact on policy and program development, because without statistical data, we are not able to track if there are any changes happening or how to draft the policy if we do not have any statistical data on adult learning and education. In some, I agree with Ms. Tekla, because she also mentioned about the domestic violence in her presentation. There were a really high increase in cases of domestic violence, where enforced confinement in families, it caused like severe implications on women's and children's safety. And all the representatives of USBE in 3 countries, they told about the cases when they were really rise in domestic violence. And of course, there were some legal counseling services available, but they were not mobile due to the mobility restrictions. And even they were not available for online access. So it means one of the big hindrances here is limited no legal and counseling services due to mobility restrictions during the COVID. And another one is, since we are all Central Asian countries and our economy is so much dependent on Russian Federation, so we all were just we all noticed that there was increase in unemployment with the returns of migrant workers from Russian Federation, which caused not only economic just hole, but also it caused other social problems and social issues among the population, and particularly in communities. So, and here are just recommendations based on the discussion which we held on February 22nd. So we just grouped them, and the first one is participation, equity, inclusion, which means, so of course we need to put much effort to access ICT for older population for online learning, because again, if you go back and look at the Sustainable Development slogan, it says no one should left behind. So it means particularly elderly population, they should be very well equipped with ICT, and particularly if we take just lifelong learning kind of process for making SDGs just achieve its goals, it should be something that we need to pay attention, and particularly the governments in other countries should pay attention to that. The second one is self-employment skills training and reskilling opportunities, particularly during the pandemic when the mobility restriction was kind of put in the countries. So in this period, lots of unemployed and lots of just migrant workers, they felt the urge for self-employment skills, and therefore we think that this is something that should be paid attention to, and by creating this kind of trainings where unemployed, elderly, and marginalized group will be able to develop their self-employment skills and reskilling opportunities, it could help them to better adapt to new situation. Another important recommendation is education for migrant workers that should be suited to the labor market. Particularly, we can notice that there are some demands and supply in the labor market, they are not properly met, and therefore we think that based on the needs of the labor market, the education and particularly the curriculum for the migrant workers should be better suited and better developed for the needs of the labor market. The next one is infrastructure for internet ICT. Of course, in big cities, in these three countries, we can notice that there are huge gap in terms of using and connectivity to internet, and therefore there is a huge need for building infrastructure for internet and ICT. Another one is ensuring accessibility to ICT to all. When we talk about digital equity, we mean that all these ICT and all these programs, online trainings, and everything should be accessible to all the population, and particularly for adult learning and education. Because nowadays we can see that the whole world is shifting to virtual learning and to virtual education. Therefore, it is very important for us also to ensure accessibility of ICT to all. The last but not the least is establishment of resource centers that are accessible to all adult learners, particularly just marginalized groups, elderly population, migrant workers, women and youth who are part of the marginalized groups. In the group of quality, we have put some of the recommendations that we think that should be taken into consideration. The first one is improve quality of online AIL and making them understandable. So in many cases, just when we talk about the online AIL, sometimes the quality of them is lacking, or sometimes it's not clear, understandable. The second one is adapting offline training programs into online mode. So particularly in Tajikistan, we have noticed that when there was a lockdown and people just had some mobility restrictions, then lots of schools, they suffered, and lots of parents and lots of children were left behind without education, because all these training programs, and particularly just, you know, in adult learning centers, all those training programs, they were not adapted to online mode. So therefore, if we want to ensure the quality, we need to adapt all these offline training programs into online mode. Another one is just the pandemic showed us that each country kind of handles the situation in a different way. In some cases, we can see they with some successful cases, and it would be very good to promote best practices and to showcase them among other countries, and so it would be very good also to learn from successful adult learning and education cases. Next one, promotion of an expert or advisory group from public organizations, civil society, and community. In some countries, such kind of bodies exist, but again, they are not so activated and they are not so engaged in discussion of such kind of policies, and therefore we are also urging that it should be visible in these three countries. So therefore we are for promotion of an expert or advisory group from public organizations, civil society, and community. Next one is development of educators manual and trainings on provision of online AIL. So again, like when we're talking about online AIL, it doesn't only mean, you know, moving to digitalization, but also at the same time, we are talking about the educators manuals and trainings, which are suitable for online mode of trainings and for online accessibility of all these educators manuals and trainings. So therefore, they should be developed in a quality way, so it serves its purposes better. Next one is, in the next category, we have policies and legislation. The first one, it says again about the development of statistical system for adult learning and education. So as we know, like there is a very nice monitoring mechanism like Braille, and it should be very good to develop a monitoring system, so it would be used in participation in the country reporting, just to have a not only just quality and quantitative data, but also to be able to track what kind of changes are happening and how we can respond to those changes. The next one is validation of informal learning and recognition of non-formal education. As we discussed, in some countries there is a validation system exists, like for example in Tajikistan, when the migrant workers who have been skilled and got some kind of job skills, so he can just apply to this validation system, and after just performing his skills, he can just get this validation. But unfortunately, not all three countries, not all the three countries fully enjoy these opportunities. So another one is financing. Again, it's one of the maybe major requirement that the government commitment to AIL should be more through policy and program development in terms of financing, because lack of financing, it also hits all the sectors of education, and particularly AIL is left behind everything. Next one is increase in domestic allocation of budgets for public education, especially in AIL and non-formal education. So, of course, we know that pandemic caused not only economic turndown, but also social and other just issues raised, and particularly, the domestic allocation of budgets were cut for many programs, and particularly now it's time to think about that, because public education and right to education is something that all the citizens should enjoy, and therefore we urge for this also just to increase in domestic allocation of budgets for public education, and particularly for AIL and non-formal education. So as for the governance, again, we think it's important that AIL should be given continued support, not only during the trainings, but also after the trainings. So when we provide trainings to ALE, so we also should be able to stay in touch with them, and also just to have some kind of refreshment trainings for them, and also just to stay in touch in order to receive feedback, and also to stay tuned about to meet those learning needs of ALE. Development of structured state programs to enhance ALE. Again, some programs exist, but they do not fully meet all those needs of ALE. So therefore, we think it's again important to develop a structured state programs in all these three countries to enhance adult learning and education. And of course, the next point which makes sense is expanding partnerships in ALE at national, regional, and international level. Because when we are talking about the partnership, we mean not only civil society organization having a partnership, but also we mean here a very broad understanding of this expanding partnership in terms of donors' involvement, and also regional civil society organization, but also international NGOs who are all who can be also stakeholders in ALE, and who can also do partnership in order to improve the ALE in these three countries. Next point is mechanism for civil society participation at local, national, regional, and global level.
Извините, Насиба, прошу прощения, вы могли бы поторопиться, потому что...
I'm sorry, Nasiba, can you hurry up because we're late and behind the schedule? Could you wrap up, please? 2 minutes, please.
Of course, we think that mechanisms for civil society participation and engagement should be fostered at the local, national, regional, and global level. Next one is collaboration with local government in expanding ALE, and also expanding like ALE best cases. And the last and not the least one is social partnership for sustainability, which means just sustainability should be based on social partnership among not only civil societies at the local level, but also at the regional and national and international level. So where all the stakeholders come together, unite together, and develop better practices, and develop better just partnerships for adult learning and education. So I did my best to make it brief and short, and I hope that I did it on time. I finished on time. Yeah, if you got any questions, please go ahead. And thank you very much.
Большое спасибо, Насиба, да, я прошу прощения.
Nasiba, thank you very much. Apologies, well, you're slightly beyond your time limit, but it's been really interesting to hear from you, to see your presentation. Thank you very much again. So based on our chat situation, we don't have any substantial questions. There was one question related to the point that it would have been nice to learn particular examples of the successful education and learning and education of adults, specifically how it could respond to the COVID-19 challenges. So if you wonder or have some other questions or wonder about some other examples, what particular programs have been implemented by our partners in the region, so you can write to us, to the office, and we'll try to respond to these questions. Unless there are any further questions to this presentation, Dr. Nasiba, or if you have any questions, of course, you can use our chart to ask these questions, and we'll try to respond. Unless there are any extra comments, I think we could move to the next session of our program, which is going to be moderated by the representative of the UNESCO Institute for the Lifelong Learning, Mr. Maus. I'm passing the floor to you, Werner.
Thank you very much, Ravshan, and thank you to all the contributors so far. In this last session, we would like to wrap up things, make, if possible, a summary, but also give justice to what we have heard. And this is somehow, I think, an impossible task to do everything, but I have a plan. And that's why I would like to invite you to a short exercise. And reflecting in view of the World Conference about these main issues we have heard about ALE issues, about how to enhance cooperation, about bringing forward innovations and successful cases, but linking it to the implementation of the SDG target 4.6 and sustainable development, and somehow define priorities for the future, ending up in a kind of regional recommendations. So my invitation is the following. I would like to ask each of the speakers to give an answer in 2 to 3 minutes on one question. Please, Dinara, if you could give me the slide which we have prepared for that purpose. And I would like to ask each of the speakers, but in reverse sequence. So we are starting with Nasiba, then Tekla, and then go through the 5 countries. And I would like to ask each of them to give a point on the question, please identify from your countries or from your organization's perspective the 2 to 3 main aspects to be discussed at CONFINTEA VII in 2022. So this is the exercise I would like to invite you, so that everybody has then the chance to speak a few minutes only, if possible, so we can fill the time we have with a kind of focused discussion. I would like to give, and I'll give you some minutes to put your thoughts together while I am trying to look at the main points, what I have heard from all the presentations. I think in all the country presentations, we could see a strong link between ALE and skills development. So there is a strong interest to provide those populations who are in need with the appropriate skills so that they have possibilities to engage on the labor market. In principle, there is a need to look for employment support. A key target, a key objective of ALE is this support to employment, if possible, decent employment. Second item I've heard is that there is, in several countries, there is a strong activity on providing legal frameworks for ALE, looking into the laws and the regulations and the policy situations, which is good from our perspective. UNESCO is always interested in helping countries to provide especially a policy environment. And from the countries, I have heard that very clearly, that there is activities going on towards that direction of constructing the right legal frameworks in support of ALE. There wasn't much mentioning, to my, how to say, astonishment, about literacy needs, except from Kyrgyzstan. I've heard that. It seems as if there is not a strong focus on basic skills, and to a certain extent they are mentioned, but without a prior concern with regard to literacy and numeracy, rather in a way of understanding basic skills in a larger sense, so that ICT competencies are part of those competencies which are needed in the future. Everywhere is that there is a strong interest in somehow dealing with digitization. Digital skills are needed by everybody, and opening up to these to this world of digital competencies and helping adults and learners to be able to engage in that is another prior concern. And this goes together to a certain extent with the next item, responses to the COVID-19 crisis. I think we have heard from several sides that there is a boost in digital practice. We are engaging in Zoom conferences all over the place. We are using digital devices. We are forced to, we cannot avoid it. And so there is an enormous practice in digital skills, but there are still those who have not all the competencies or also do not have the technical possibilities. That's another aspect, but providing the competences, the digital skills for further engagement is the other broad field that has been addressed. So this goes together with the COVID-19 response. AIL is supposed to give an answer to the crisis and is giving an answer. And so these two aspects to a certain extent go together. Lastly, there is a strong interest in international cooperation. On the one hand, looking at the Sustainable Development Goals, at the CONFINTEA process, thank you, which also provides an arena of further international cooperation, that there is a strong need in sharing approaches, learning from each other, looking at approaches that are successful in the neighbor country, in the sub-region, or beyond. And that's why we hope that we can engage further in this process. It is in our full interest to engage and to promote international cooperation so that the players have the opportunity to be heard on the one hand, but also to learn from each other and to see in how far adult learning and education is an effective tool for sustainable development and development of our societies and of ourselves. So it's along these lines how I would summarize the impressions I've got from the presentations. But now I'm inviting you to the mentioned exercise and ask you to identify from your, in this case, Nasiba, you are the first one, from your organization's perspective, the 2 to 3 main aspects to be discussed at CONFINTEA VII. As I said, I would like to follow the reverse sequence, starting with Nasiba, then going to Tekla, then to the countries in reverse order: Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, and finally Kazakhstan. Please help me in this exercise. I hope you are willing to join in. Nasiba, the floor would be yours.
Okay, just a moment. Let me just, my internet is not stable. Can you hear me, everybody?
We hear you.
Okay, good. Okay. So I would like just to focus on three main aspects, sorry, okay. I would like just to focus on participation, equity, and inclusion. Because I think that AIL participation is still not enough in lifelong learning process, and therefore participation, equity, inclusion should be included and should be discussed during the CONFINTEA, particularly self-employment skills training and reskilling opportunities. This is something that when we are talking about, you know, the new situation and new world due to pandemic, this is something should be focused, because if we are talking in the long run, self-employment skills training and reskilling opportunities are very important for the AIL. And in my understanding, also my colleague also supported me, So migration will continue. Nevertheless, pandemic or not, it will still be going on, and you know, the migrants will be coming back home, or migrants will be moving to another countries. So this is something again should be focused on, like education of migrant workers should be suited to the labor market.
Thank you very much,
And
Nasiba.
the third one,
please.
and the third one should be just ensure accessibility of ICT to all. Because if we are talking about like ALE, and if we are talking about just reaching sustainable development goals, so it means just all the countries and all the citizens should have access to ICT. So it means digital equity should be observed.
Thank you very much, Nasiba, and also thank you for helping us to look also at ongoing crises, perhaps in terms, for instance, about migration aspects that need to be addressed urgently, and we shouldn't forget about that. Thanks for these aspects. I would then ask Tekla for her 2 to 3 points that should be addressed in the CONFINTEA discussions. Tekla,
Thank
are
you,
you with
Werner.
us?
Yes. Very mean question, as you can imagine, based on the wealth of material that I was trying to present and was looking at in the past few days. Okay, hard to single some out, but really I would also start maybe in a similar way to Nasiba, that equitable access, broad access, fair access should probably be in the forefront, like should be somehow the guiding motivation behind all the endeavors to strengthen the sector. And at the same time, I would want to move away maybe from the focus on skills, the keyword of employability, which is definitely very relevant for this region, and it's being stressed such a lot, but I would want to rather single out the need to use holistic approaches in order to leverage the entire broad holistic potential of ALE in terms of topics, in terms of providers, in terms of forms of education. And that this could probably best be done, this is my third point, by some kind of coordinated intersectoral cooperative approaches. So basically, keep building bridges between the different parts of the sector, the different kinds of education, the different stakeholders, and also across countries and regions. These would be my 3 points.
Okay, thank you very much, Tekla. Also helping me to keep in mind that from UNESCO's perspectives, there are 3 key areas, 3 learning fields in ALE, which is literacy and basic skills, continuing education and vocational skills, and citizenship skills. So this should not be forgotten. And there is a strong focus often on vocational skills, but there should be other opportunities to help adults and learners to get a voice and to improve their possibilities to be part of their societies. Thank you, Tekla. I would then like to ask whether Uzbekistan is with us, and a colleague from Uzbekistan would be willing to respond to our question and identify 1, 2, or 3 aspects that are key from their perspective to be discussed, to be debated at CONFINTEA. Is somebody from Uzbekistan with us?
Я здесь.
Please.
Yes, I'm here. Да, пожалуйста. Okay, Mr. Werner, thank you very much for an opportunity to speak. And these are just thoughts aloud. We all know that ALE exists, and today we've learned about ALE today. So the question is, what's going to be ALE tomorrow? What will it be like ALE tomorrow. I think that we will have to react to the challenges from the society, personal challenges, economic challenges, and you're absolutely right. There are some UNESCO values which are focusing on the education at large. And we all do recognize that UNESCO is setting forth all the standards for the whole sector of culture, in addition to education and science. This is the reason for which I believe that we will have to form the future mission, the mission of the future ALE, what's going to be the future ALE's mission. What skills, we know about them. We all know that everybody should acquire hard skills or soft skills. And what kind of methods or methodology in the format of ALE, unlike and differently from the classical education and learning, when the audience, the students are pretty heterogeneous, broad, mobile, and there are, from my point of view, a lot of advantages, a lot of positive points that can be borrowed from ALE. Well, this is what I think, but of course, I can continue speculating on it a bit longer, but I guess for now it's sufficient.
Thank you very much, dear colleague. I'm sorry that I cannot always pronounce the names. I'm illiterate in the script I see on my screen to a certain extent, but thanks a lot for helping me, for bringing in this view. And I think that's exactly the way how I would, how we can proceed, and helping UNESCO to get the voices together so that a vital debate engages towards a future of ALE. How should ALE look like in future? And that will certainly be a key question. So thanks a lot, dear colleague. Next speaker, I would like to ask from Turkmenistan. Again, I do not have, unfortunately, I do not have the name. Is Turkmenistan with us and ready to give their contribution 2 to 3 minutes on the 2 to 3 main aspects?
Господин Пурли Расулов, если вы еще с нами.
Mr. Kurli Rasulov, if you are still with us, please kindly express your point of view. Yes, Mirgul, I'm here. I've missed out a little bit because of connection. Could you please repeat your question? The question is from you, the point of view of your country. What are 2 or 3 main aspects, key aspects should be discussed during CONFINTEA VII in 2022? As it has already been mentioned in my presentation, we came up with a couple of proposals that we believe to be pretty topical for today. And these are the cooperation in the innovative technologies and in the area of advanced technologies. And we really have to enhance the legislative basis of digital technologies. And the second area of activity is cooperation in the implementation of SDGs. We believe that it will be very useful and expedient for all participants to establish interregional cooperation in the area of SDG implementation by conducting some joint trainings or consultations. And the third proposal is improvement of the academic cooperation, which is probably one of the priorities. And I believe that we have to establish a way of inviting teachers from foreign countries and also conducting online lectures and seminars with participation on foreign lecturers and professors for exchange of experience. So these are 3 main proposals that we would like to be discussed during CONFINTEA.
Great. Thank you very much for these aspects, and thank you also for highlighting the need, or the, how to say, the urgency to promote international exchange and to look for experiences in neighbor countries, but also in the sub-region, to help effective practices to be shared and to be applied elsewhere. As we know that often they cannot be adopted simply, but need to be reinvented in context, but contexts are similar. And that's the key driving force of international exchange of experiences. And UNESCO is very much ready to support that. And we also know from donors that international exchange and helping to get practice in different contexts will be of key concern. So that is something we will hear more about. And still, and again, the digital skills are needed by learners, by adults, by everybody. And the future will bring further competencies, but also the need for further engaging and bring about the competencies. Thank you, Mr. Rajulov, for this contribution, which is well taken and will be also appear in the report of this meeting, which will be brought together from all the contributions and from the debates. Thank you very much. And then I would like to ask for a view from Tajikistan. Mr. Momurov, I think, is he still with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you.
Спасибо огромное.
I would still like to invite you to
Да, вы
have a
знаете,
look
я
at
хотел
the-
бы обязательно вас пригласить. Yes, I do support our previous colleague who proposed to promote ICT. And the new approach to the future, because we are applying classical methods, and we are issuing the educational certificates to our students, and it is also a classical way. What's going to happen in the future? And I do agree with my colleague from Uzbekistan, because not everywhere and not always the methods that we are using today are efficient. Maybe such methods are yielding some effect, but I believe not everywhere. And also, what I would like also to hear from you in the future is the link between the employers and the educational establishments. What are new methods, efficient methods are available in the international practice to involve as much employers as possible to educational process?
Thank you very much. This reminds me, and I can make some, how to say, promotion of the latest global report on adult learning and education, just to respond to this question with regard to employers' share in continuing education. The last Grail has shown that employer-supported adult learning and education is the most influential and the most vital part of ALE from the three fields of learning. And there is much purpose in helping employers also engage in the skills of their employees. And much is known already. There are mechanisms to make use of that, but also to support this on country level. And this will for sure also be an item that deserves further interest and also support, because there is evidence that employer-sponsored ALE is successful, is helping learners and employees to succeed on the labor market further. and will be a most vital field of alien future. Thanks a lot for this remark, and this will be taken into account for sure. And we will take up this message, and we'll try to help countries to get the possibilities to engage their systems, their education systems towards that way by engaging with relevant actors such as employers. They are key in this area, and they are often very much willing to give their share. It's often a need just to coordinate things appropriately, and UNESCO is on your side fully to help engaging in further, contacts, connections, and support to that end. Thanks a lot. So then I would like to go to Kyrgyzstan, I think, where I've heard this at least mentioning of literacy skills as a concern, which was well taken from UNESCO side. And but nevertheless, if I could ask for the 2 to 3 main aspects from your perspective after hearing all the contributions from the different speakers, please go ahead.
Господин Умуров, если вы все еще с
Mr. Omurov, if you are still with us. Yes, thank you. Yes, I would like to share some ideas regarding proposed aspects for the upcoming meeting and its the discussion. I would like to share probably with you one initiative that we would like to promote, which was actually caused by a pandemic, because during pandemic, all of us, we were facing one huge challenge. Since the restrictions were introduced and the quarantine was imposed, a lot of citizens of our country, starting from the youth and including the adults, they were supposed to either accept or provide services online, remotely. And according to our legislation, it is related to the availability of digital skills. And therefore, if you take, for example, the younger generation, the students of secondary schools and universities, of course, they were facing the lack of skills, digital skills. For example, to continue their education. If we take adults, there are some categories, for example, pensioners. They were supposed to get some services using digital technologies because it was, of course, it was necessary for them to have digital skills. And based on this, we put forth an initiative according to which we were supposed to identify the set of skills and the level of digital skills that a child is supposed to master after they finish a kindergarten or secondary or primary school. Secondly, what are the digital skills that students will have to have after they finish secondary school or when they graduate from the primary vocational schools, secondary vocational schools, and what should be the digital skills of the pensioners to enable them to accept fully fledged online services intended for them. For example, banking services, because it is necessary for the pensioners to make payments or even such rudimentary things like, for example, visiting the e-government portal and to obtain a kind of certificate that they may need. So this is what I would like to propose for a sub-regional level. Maybe it will be good to establish for every level of population according to the age categories and social position to identify the skills that they should have, digital skills that they should have. And secondly, I believe that it could be a kind of mutual understanding of skills in the region.
Number two, I'd like to propose basically to establish or form or launch some sub-regional platform for basically developing some skills that are in high demand. What is being dictated by today's and tomorrow's challenge? Just to make sure that every country, when doing AIL, we should be guided or oriented with the help of this platform. We could get some updates so that we develop proper skills. So what's also important is capacity building. We'll need to discuss issues of partner relations or some interaction or collaboration efforts at the sub-regional level to do capacity building specifically for those AIL providers who are involved in this AIL or extra education while preparing tutors, trainers, coaches. Make sure we have this common policy for the methodology of using various technologies, the capacity building for those who do AIL, because the adults, well, this is a different story. And the third point, what I voiced, it would be nice if we discussed the sub-regional level. Well, through the joint efforts, we developed this, and it had been voiced before that migration will always be there. And for the purposes of mutual acknowledgement of skills, we'll need to develop some sort of skill matrix for all of the industries, for all of the areas of education, of AIL. And we could also identifying learning outcomes for the specific skills. Then every country would be able to coordinate the structure and the contents of adult training or AIL, being guided by those skills that we must provide, specifically digital skills, to be able to have proper guidelines, and in the area of some other professions. And the last point I'd like to add for the upcoming CONFINTEA VII, it would be nice to share some experience of AIL, well, specifically presenting or demonstrating the best case examples, the base cases, well, so that all of the providers of education, specifically including ministries of education, we should be able to see this, just to be able to arm ourselves with the best case practices from the neighboring countries, so that we would be able to develop some sort of mechanisms and procedures for developing practical skills, so that every country should be able to use the best practice examples for the sub-regional conference.
Thank you very much, Mr. Umurov, and your 3 points are well taken. And especially, I think your reminder that a kind of platform for exchange would be useful on a sub-regional level. And the exchange on best practice at international conference is a given practice. That is somehow the purpose of having such conferences, that successful innovations and good practices are shared and they are shown. And that's the whole raison d'etre of a conference, that participants have the opportunity to look into other turfs, what is working there. And so this exchange will certainly take place and will be a major concern for the conference. Also, I also would like to thank you for reminding us that digital skills are not only necessary for children and the younger population, but also for the elderly, and that the elderly, older population is a key target group to engage in that, and this is a key topic of AIL. And so this will be also of concern, and thanks for reminding us. And I would like, with all this passion of digital skills, I would also take up a comment from the chat by Katarina Popovic that we should not forget that there is still also a kind of digital divide, and that not only skills are needed, but also access is not equitably given and is of course of concern. And there should be a concern from the side of countries to care for equitable access and to take care that those who do not have the opportunity get such access. I think this is for sure. Thanks also, Katarina, for this comment. Will be of concern and will be will also a point of discussion. So thank you very much to both of you. And then I would like to go back to our first speaker, to Kazakhstan. I'm wondering whether we can then hear from, Mr. Omorov, you wanted to add something? I just saw you speaking. Okay, thank you. Then I would like to ask for Kazakhstan for their
Dear Werner, actually, Kazakhstan delegation had to leave as they are also organizing their own meeting, but they assured me that they will send in writing their response to this question. So yeah, unfortunately, we won't have the response now. But I'm aware of the time, but I would like to add also from myself, if I may, as perhaps you can consider this as a voice of the field office colleagues who are working closely with the countries. And also our colleague Bakhtior from Tashkent office was also saying that along with those basic skills as well as ICT skills, the pandemic actually also brought the importance of skills related to sanitation, or how we call it rightly, sanitation or medical following skills. And also I think the growing from myself, and also that we have discussed on our webinars with the countries, is that this growing conspiracy years have also brought the importance of the media information literacy, not also among young people, but also among adult, among adults as well. So, and there is also one comment from in Russian in the chat from Dildora Merkulova. She's saying that the decrease in the gap of on the quality of education of adults, which are delivered by state and private providers of education, especially to the most vulnerable groups, to young people and women, this should be also considered. So the quality difference in providers of the adult education, I think this is a point. And also from Tatiana Tretyakova, if you have also seen, there were also a couple of points raised in the chat regarding the, saying, is it possible to keep the current level of education in virtual mode, methods, technique, practices, how to possible to keep the current level of education in virtual mode. So these are the comments, and yeah, over from me. Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot, Mirgul. From my understanding, we are reaching now the end of this session. I could imagine that there are further questions to be addressed. We will try to remain at the, how to say, to have open ears, to be accessible to further comments, also questions. we will have further opportunities to exchange. I'm quite pleased to see the audience we had today. And this is, again, a kind of fantastic opportunity of our digital world, that it is so easy to give access and to broaden the audience. And I hope that it has been relevant and interesting for those who have listened and to us. But I'm looking forward for further opportunities. And so just allow me at the kind of final point within this session to look also forward. We are now engaging into further sub-regional consultations in the Asian region. The next one we will have for South Asia on the 30th of March. We will also have one for Southeast Asia and one for the Pacific. And with this round of debates and possibilities to engage and getting audiences, also listeners, but also speakers from the broad variety of countries, I am really looking forward to further engage in such a dialogue and discussion. And so let me, before I'm finalizing and giving back for the closing remarks to you, Mergul, thanks a lot for having helped us in providing this audience, this forum of exchange. And this has been another example of cooperation within UNESCO. I would, of course, already thank from my part to all those who were there, who have contributed, who shared their thoughts, who gave us insights into regional, local perspectives, helping us to understand and to shape further debates. So I would now, from my point of view, close this session. Give back to you, Mergul, for the rest. I hope you agree to me. If not, please tell me what I should do.
Yes, I agree with you. Thank you very much, Werner, everyone. Спасибо большое всем.
Thank you very much, everyone. And for the concluding words, I'd like to give the floor to the director of the Cluster Bureau of UNESCO, Ms. Krista Pickett. Thank you, Mayor Gould, distinguished Vice Minister, a distinguished representative of various ministries, distinguished colleagues, partners, participants. Well, I would like to thank you all for the active participation in this consultation. I think it's been very interesting to hear about the status of AL in some of the countries, some of the issues that are pending resolution in this area and the countries of Central Asia. I've been especially pleased to hear from you how you appreciate this regional cooperation and the opportunities for sharing knowledge like today's. I'm not going to try to summarize this whole discussion, the whole breadth of our discussion, because a lot of things have been mentioned need to improve. The legal frameworks, enhancing and improving financing options, improving quality of curriculum, digitalization, the importance of including education into various global programs, and a mechanism for cooperations. Basically, AL cooperation at the regional and national level. Simply would like to say again that based on the results of this meeting, the report will be prepared about the key objectives and possibilities for the policy updates in the AL area and sub-region, specifically which will serve as the foundation for the development of recommendations with regard to the regional final documents and recommendations for the CONFINTEA VII. We'll share this report with you, of course, as soon as it becomes available. Later in this year, there will be this regional preparatory conference for the Asian Pacific, a region that will identify the current ongoing issues, matters of ongoing concern in the region, and recommendations for the CONFINTEA VII. We are really looking forward to the point that today's meeting and sub-regional report will provide relevant data in the area of AL in the sub-region. So thank you very much again for your participation and contribution. The representatives of the ministries, civil society organizations, speakers, our partners, DVV International colleagues from the UNESCO Institute, Bangkok, Tashkent offices, Almaty office. I'd like to wish you all very good health, very strong health, all the best wishes. Thank you very much. We'll see you again.
Да, конечно.
Mirgul, can I say a word? Especially, I would like to thank Ms. Pickard. I'm very pleased to see you. We've been really missing you down here in Tashkent. I just recall that last time when you had this big forum, specifically on the issues and surveys for specifically related to and the topic that you were in charge of in that workshop, they were very useful for us. So thank you very much, and hopefully you will continue your effort. Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much, everyone. Kop Rahmat, and Kazakh and Uzbek, Tashakur. So please fill out our questionnaires. We'll really appreciate your feedback, your opinions. You have a link in your chat. Everyone have a nice day, nice evening, and goodbye.
Bye-bye, Mirgul. Thank you.
Bye, Werner. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, colleagues, for participating.
Thank you all. Greetings from Tashkent. Congratulations with.
Good to hear from you, Bakhtiar.
Thank you. Thank you very much to everybody. Have a nice day.
Bye, Amir. Stay well.
Thank you. You too.
Heribert, good to see you.
Werner, alles Gute, top.
Danke. See you.
Yeah,
Bye.
see you soon. Bye.
And
thank you to all of you. It was a great, well, for us, morning, midday.
Und irgendwann gehen wir wieder zum Friseur, Heribert, hä? Alle zusammen.
Wir kriegen sicherlich alle irgendwann mal einen Gutschein.
Tschüss.
Hallo, Heribert.
Alles Gute,
Alles gut.
tschüss. Oh,
Tschüss.
Angela, das ist ja wunderbar.
Hallo.
Wie geht's?
Alle beisammen. Freue mich, dich zu sehen.
Wunderbar.
Schönen Tag noch, ne? Wir sprechen.
Take time. All the very best. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Yes,
Bye.
thank you. Good to hear some German at the end. Bye. Thank you very much.